Hello, wonderful people. Welcome to Arcane Paradox, your story destination. We have an absolute treat for you today. What if Fleur's Veela fire accidentally touched Harry and shattered 29 soul fragments Dumbledore planted since birth? If you're enjoying these stories, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support keeps the stories coming. With that said, let the adventure begin. Chapter 1. The fire's touch. November in the Scottish Highlands brought a biting chill that cut through warming charms like they were gossamer. Harry Potter shivered as he waited in the champion's tent, his fingers fidgeting with the hem of his robes. The canvas walls trembled against the wind, and with each gust came the roar of the crowd outside, hundreds of students eager to watch four teenagers face dragons. Dragons, Harry muttered under his breath, still unable to believe it. Who thinks this is appropriate for a school competition? No one answered him. Victor Crumb paced in one corner, his heavy brows furrowed in concentration. Cedric Diggory stood motionless, eyes closed, lips moving in silent rehearsal of spells. And then there was Fleur Delacour. The Beauxbatons champion sat apart from the others, her silver blonde hair gleaming even in the dim light of the tent. Her face, usually a mask of cool confidence, betrayed something else today, fear, perhaps. Or something more primal. Harry noticed a faint shimmer around her skin, like heat rising from summer pavement. Ludo Bagman burst into the tent with the energy of a man who wouldn't personally be facing a dragon. Champions! Gather round! His voice boomed with inappropriate cheer. Time to draw your dragons. Harry's heart sank as the miniature Hungarian horntail snarled in his palm. Fourth to go. He would have to watch the others first, his anxiety building with each passing minute. Fleur drew the common Welsh green and visibly relaxed, though the shimmering around her didn't fade. As she returned to her seat, her eyes met Harry's. For a brief moment, something passed between them, recognition, perhaps. A shared understanding that neither of them wanted to be here. Potter, she said softly as she passed him, her accent less pronounced than usual. Be careful today. Something feels wrong. Before Harry could ask what she meant, Bagman was calling for Cedric, and the tournament began. Harry tried to focus as Cedric transfigured a rock into a dog to distract his dragon. The strategy worked well enough, though Cedric didn't escape unscathed. The crowd's cheers echoed through the tent walls, and Harry's stomach twisted tighter. Then Crumb was up, using a conjunctivitis curse that made his dragon stomp around in agony, crushing half its eggs. The judges didn't approve, but Crumb got his golden egg all the same. When Fleur's turn came, Harry found himself edging toward the tent flap. Something compelled him to watch her. He peered out just as she entered the arena, her wand gripped tightly in slender fingers. The Welsh green spotted her immediately, its serpentine neck arching as its nostrils flared. Fleur began to weave a complex pattern with her wand, her lips forming words Harry couldn't hear. The dragon seemed to grow drowsy, its massive head dipping lower. Brilliant, Harry whispered. She's putting it to sleep. But something was happening to Fleur. That shimmering around her skin intensified, and strands of her silver hair began to rise as if caught in a static field. The crowd murmured as the air around her wavered with heat. The dragon, sensing the change, shook off its drowsiness. It raised its head, yellow eyes fixing on Fleur with renewed interest. A low growl rumbled from its throat. Fleur faltered for just a moment, and Harry saw a panic flash across her face. She resumed her spell with greater intensity, but her control was slipping. Sparks of actual fire began to form at her fingertips, dancing up her arms. What's happening to her? Someone in the crowd shouted. Harry knew he shouldn't be watching, he should be preparing for his own task, but he couldn't look away. Something was very wrong. The Welsh green suddenly reared back and released a jet of flame directly at Fleur. She reacted instinctively, throwing up her hands. What happened next defied explanation. The dragon's fire met Fleur's outstretched hands and seemed to part around her. But in that same instant, Fleur's own magic erupted. Blue-white flames burst from her palms, her eyes blazed with an inner light, and her features sharpened, becoming almost bird-like. Veela fire, Harry heard Hermione gasp from somewhere in the stands. The two streams of fire, the dragon's natural flame and Fleur's Veela fire, collided in a spectacular explosion. The crowd screamed. Handlers rushed forward. And somehow, impossibly, a tendril of that blue-white flame arced away from the chaos, shooting over the barriers and straight toward the champion's tent. Toward Harry. He should have ducked back inside. He should have run. Instead, Harry stood transfixed as the fire streaked toward him like a seeking missile. Time seemed to slow as the flame approached, and in that stretched moment, Harry could have sworn he saw faces within the fire, dozens of them, calling to him. The Veela fire struck him in the center of his chest. Pain unlike anything Harry had ever known coursed through him. Worse than the basilisk venom, worse than growing back bones, worse even than Voldemort's touch in his first year. This was pain that reached beyond his body and into his very soul. Harry didn't realize he was screaming until his throat went raw. He didn't feel himself collapse to the ground, didn't notice the crowd's attention shifting from Fleur to him. All he knew was the fire burning through invisible barriers within him, barriers he never knew existed. And then the voices came. Finally, cried a woman's voice inside his mind. Freedom, after all these years. The boy survives, noted a deeper, male voice. Remarkable. Most vessels would have been destroyed. He's strong, said a third. Dumbledore chose well, even if his purpose was foul. More voices joined the chorus, too many to distinguish. Memories that weren't his flooded Harry's consciousness, spells he'd never learned, places he'd never visited, people he'd never met. Knowledge and power and emotion, all crashing through him like a tidal wave. Harry. Harry. Someone was shaking him. Hands gripped his shoulders. He opened his eyes to see Hermione's face, pale with fear, hovering over him. Beyond her, a circle of concerned faces, Ron, his expression a mixture of awe and horror, Professor McGonagall, her lips pressed into a thin white line, Madame Pomfrey, already waving diagnostic spells, and Dumbledore. The headmaster's face triggered something in Harry, a surge of anger that wasn't entirely his own. Harry's vision swam as another memory surfaced. Dumbledore stood over a crib, his crib, wand moving in complex patterns while chanting in a language Harry didn't recognize. A small glowing orb hovered between them, containing what looked like swirling mist with a face barely visible within it. "Forgive me, Bathilda," Dumbledore murmured as the orb descended toward infant Harry. "Your knowledge will serve a greater purpose now." The memory faded as Harry gasped for breath. Dumbledore was watching him intently, those blue eyes no longer twinkling but sharp with calculation. "Get away from him." A new voice cut through the crowd. Fleur Delacour pushed past the circle of onlookers, her appearance almost back to normal except for a lingering glow to her skin. "You don't understand what's happening." Dumbledore turned to her, his voice gentle but firm. "Miss Delacour, perhaps you should be seen by Madame Pomfrey as well." That was quite an impressive display of, "I know what happened," Fleur interrupted, something few students would dare to do. "My fire, it touched him. It should not have been possible, but it did, and now." She looked at Harry with a mixture of fascination and concern. Now things are awakening within him that should not be there. Harry struggled to sit up, feeling as though his body belonged to someone else. "Fragments," he muttered. "I can feel them. Pieces of, people." He looked directly at Dumbledore. "What did you do to me?" A flicker of something, alarm. Guilt, crossed Dumbledore's face before his expression smoothed into practiced concern. "Harry, my boy, you're disoriented. Magical shock can cause hallucinations. We should get you to the hospital wing immediately." "Non," Fleur said firmly, kneeling beside Harry. "He needs space and time. The integration can be overwhelming." "Integration?" Professor McGonagall echoed. "Miss Delacour, What exactly do you believe has happened here? Fleur hesitated, glancing between Harry and Dumbledore. Veela fire is purifying. It burns away magic that does not belong. Curses, possessions. Her blue eyes narrowed slightly at Dumbledore. Bindings. Another memory surfaced in Harry's mind, more recent, Dumbledore in his office, Harry's first year. The third-floor corridor is forbidden, he announced to the staff. In private, after the others left, the Philosopher's Stone will make excellent bait. And perhaps a suitable test for young Potter. You knew, Harry whispered, staring at Dumbledore. You knew Quirrell was possessed. You knew I'd go after the stone. The crowd around them had grown, students and staff alike watching the exchange with confusion. Dumbledore's expression remained placid, but Harry could see tension in the set of his shoulders. Harry, these accusations are concerning. I believe Madame Pomfrey should examine you immediately. Dumbledore reached for Harry's arm. The moment the headmaster's fingers brushed Harry's skin, something inside Harry recoiled violently. A burst of magic erupted between them, knocking Dumbledore back several steps. Gasps rose from the crowd. Harry felt the fragments within him stirring, responding to a perceived threat. He will try to suppress us again, warned a voice in Harry's mind. The boy must get somewhere safe, agreed another. I need to leave, Harry said, struggling to his feet. I can't, there's too much, Potter, don't be ridiculous, Snape's voice cut in as the potions master pushed through the crowd. You're clearly suffering from magical exhaustion and delusions. He is not delusional, Fleur said coldly. But he does need rest. Somewhere private. She turned to McGonagall rather than Dumbledore. Professor, surely there is somewhere in the castle where he can recover without interference. McGonagall looked between Dumbledore and Harry, indecision clear on her face. Then her gaze shifted to Harry's scar, which had begun to glow with an eerie light. Albus, she said quietly, perhaps it would be best if Mr. Potter were given some space. Whatever has happened here is clearly magical in nature and forcing the issue may exacerbate his condition. Dumbledore's smile didn't reach his eyes. Of course, Minerva. I merely wish to ensure Harry's well-being. He turned to Madame Pomfrey. Poppy, would you escort Harry and Miss Delacour to the hospital wing? I believe a private room would be appropriate. I'll come too, Hermione said quickly, reaching for Harry's hand. The moment she touched him, Harry gasped as knowledge flooded him, not from the fragments, but about Hermione herself. He could sense the magic within her, brilliantly complex and powerful. And alongside it, he sensed something else, a subtle magical constraint, limiting and redirecting her abilities. Another memory surfaced, Dumbledore observing a young Hermione in her first-year transfiguration class, then later casting subtle spells on her books, spells to dampen curiosity in certain subjects, to create mental blocks against questioning authority. Hermione, Harry whispered, horrified. He's been limiting you too. Hermione's brow furrowed. What do you mean, Harry? Before he could explain, a commotion arose at the edge of the crowd. Rita Skeeter was pushing her way forward, acid green quill already dancing above her parchment. My, she called out. What a delicious scene. Boy who lived struck by mysterious Veela magic, accuses Dumbledore of manipulation. Care to elaborate, Harry? That's quite enough, McGonagall snapped. This tournament has already become a circus without your help, Miss Skeeter. As the attention shifted to the confrontation between McGonagall and Rita, Fleur leaned close to Harry. We need to get you away from here, she murmured. Somewhere the headmaster cannot easily reach you while you adjust. Harry nodded, the movement sending fresh waves of dizziness through him. The fragments were still settling, memories and knowledge swirling like leaves in a storm. One thing was becoming increasingly clear, however, Dumbledore had been manipulating him from the beginning, using him as a repository for something. Room of requirement, he whispered to Fleur. 7th floor, across from the tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy. Fleur's eyes widened slightly. You know of it? Even most professors don't. I know now, Harry replied. One of the fragments had supplied the knowledge, a witch who had discovered the room in the 1700s and used it to conduct experimental charm work away from prying eyes. While the adults were distracted, Fleur helped Harry to his feet. Granger, she whispered to Hermione. We're taking him somewhere safe. Are you coming? Hermione looked hesitantly toward the professors, then back at Harry. Her loyalty won out. Of course I am. I'm coming too, said Ron, who had been uncharacteristically silent until now. Harry felt another surge of knowledge as he looked at his best friend, another set of constraints, different from Hermione's. Where hers dampened curiosity and independent thinking, Ron's enhanced jealousy and insecurity, keeping him emotionally volatile and intellectually underachieving. The fragments within Harry surged with indignation. These were his friends, and someone had been deliberately hobbling them to keep Harry isolated and dependent. Yes, Harry said to Ron. I need both of you. They began to edge away from the crowd, Fleur supporting Harry while Hermione and Ron flanked them protectively. They had almost reached the edge of the tournament grounds when a gentle but firm voice stopped them. Heading somewhere, Mr. Potter? Professor Flitwick stood before them, his small stature belying the power Harry could now sense radiating from him. I couldn't help but notice your hasty departure. Harry tensed, but Fleur spoke smoothly. Professor, Harry needs rest away from all this attention. Veela fire can have unusual effects on wizards. I'm simply helping him find somewhere quiet. Flitwick's shrewd eyes studied Harry's face, lingering on the still glowing scar. I see. And would this quiet place happen to be the room of requirement? Harry stiffened. How did you? I've been teaching here for over 40 years, Mr. Potter, Flitwick said with a small smile. There are few secrets of Hogwarts unknown to me. He glanced back toward Dumbledore, who was now engaged in an intense conversation with Snape. I believe I heard something about needing to check the security of the 7th floor corridor. Perhaps I should do that immediately, taking a rather circuitous route that might create a distraction. Understanding dawned on Harry. Thank you, Professor. Flitwick nodded once. I don't know what's happening here, but I trust you to explain when you can. For now, I suggest you move quickly. With that, he turned and strode purposefully toward the castle, already calling loudly about security concerns. Why is he helping us? Ron whispered as they used the opportunity to slip away. Because he's a half-goblin, Fleur explained quietly as they hurried across the grounds. Goblins can sense magical bindings and resent them deeply. If what I suspect is true, Professor Flitwick would consider it an abomination. They made their way into the castle, avoiding the main hallways. Harry was growing stronger with each step, though the fragments inside him continued to shift and settle. Occasionally, a new memory would surface, momentarily disorienting him, a witch in medieval robes, researching blood wards in a library that must have been destroyed centuries ago. A wizard dueling 3 opponents at once, using spells Harry had never heard of with effortless precision. A young woman brewing a potion that shimmered like liquid starlight, her techniques far beyond anything Snape had ever taught. By the time they reached the 7th floor, Harry was able to walk unaided, though Fleur stayed close to his side. Hermione and Ron watched with bewilderment as Harry paced before the blank wall 3 times, concentrating on what they needed. A safe place. Somewhere to recover. Somewhere Dumbledore can't reach us. A door materialized, ornate and ancient-looking. Harry pushed it open to reveal a spacious room that resembled a cross between a comfortable sitting room and a healing chamber. A fire crackled in a large hearth, comfortable chairs and sofas were arranged in a circle, and along one wall stood shelves of potions and books about healing magic. In one corner, a large 4-poster bed weighted with clean linens. Bloody hell, Ron breathed as they entered and the door sealed itself behind them. The room of requirement, Hermione said, awe in her voice. I've read about it, but I never thought, it becomes whatever you need it to be, Harry explained, moving to one of the sofas and sinking into it gratefully. The fragments were calmer now, as if the room itself was helping to stabilize them. Right now, we need safety and healing. Fleur moved to the shelves, examining the potions. These will help, she said, selecting a blue vial. Calming draft with a stabilizing agent. Perfect for magical shock. Harry accepted the potion, trusting her judgment. As he drank, a cooling sensation spread through his body, easing the chaotic swirl of the fragments. Now, Hermione said, sitting across from him with determination in her eyes, will someone please explain what's going on? Harry exchanged a glance with Fleur, who nodded encouragingly. When Fleur's Veela fire touched me, Harry began, it broke something inside me. Not something that was supposed to be there, but something artificial. Bindings. He took a deep breath. Dumbledore has been placing fragments of other people's souls inside me since I was a baby. Ron's face paled. Bloody hell, mate. That sounds like dark magic. It is, Fleur confirmed, her expression grim. Soul magic is among the most restricted forms of magic in the wizarding world. But why would Dumbledore do such a thing? Hermione asked, her voice small. He's supposed to be the greatest wizard of our time, a champion of the light. Harry closed his eyes, sorting through the fragments' knowledge. From what I can piece together, he's been collecting fragments of powerful witches and wizards for decades. Not killing them, he added quickly, seeing their horrified expressions. More like, taking impressions when they were near death or already dying. Their knowledge, their magical signatures, pieces of their consciousness. And putting them in you. Ron looked nauseated. Not just me, Harry said quietly, looking at his friends. He's been manipulating all of us. Hermione, haven't you ever wondered why certain subjects suddenly seem boring to you when you start researching them too deeply? Particularly anything about magical governance or ancient magic. Hermione's hand flew to her mouth. I thought it was just, losing interest. And Ron, Harry continued gently, the jealousy you feel sometimes, the way it comes over you like a wave even when you don't want it to, that's not natural either. Ron's ears reddened. I've always been like that, though. Since coming to Hogwarts, Harry corrected. Since meeting me. Fleur watched the exchange with growing anger. This Dumbledore, he has been playing with children's minds. With their souls. Her hands began to shimmer again. In France, such actions would earn a life sentence. Why, though? Hermione pressed, her analytical mind pushing through the shock. What's the purpose of putting these soul fragments in Harry? Harry frowned, concentrating on the scattered knowledge from the fragments. It's not completely clear yet. The fragments are still settling. But I think he's been preparing me for something. A weapon, maybe. Or a sacrifice. The prophecy, Hermione breathed. Harry's head snapped up. What prophecy? Hermione looked startled. I don't know why I said that. I don't know anything about a prophecy. Her brow furrowed. Except. I do. Somehow. She looked at Harry with dawning horror. Harry, I think some of your new knowledge is transferring to me when we're in close proximity. Fleur moved closer, studying Hermione with interest. The bindings he placed on you must be weakening in Harry's presence now. His freed magic is affecting you. Me too, Ron said suddenly. I just had the strangest thought about curse-breaking techniques I've definitely never learned. Harry felt a surge of hope. If his freed magic could help his friends break free from Dumbledore's constraints. A soft chime sounded throughout the room. One of the room's defenses, Harry somehow knew. Someone's trying to find us, he said, standing. The room is hiding us, but we should be careful. As if in response to his words, a small window appeared in one wall, showing the corridor outside where Dumbledore, McGonagall, and Snape stood in conversation. Must find him quickly, Minerva, Dumbledore was saying, his voice carrying clearly into the room. Harry's condition could be dangerous to himself and others. Albus, the boy seemed more frightened than dangerous, McGonagall replied. And Miss Delacour's concerns about magical bindings, are the fanciful interpretations of a young witch who lost control of her own magic, Dumbledore interrupted smoothly. Veela fire is unpredictable and can cause hallucinations. I fear Harry may have been exposed to some form of magical delusion. The boy has always been delusional, Snape muttered. Arrogant like his father, always seeking attention. Inside the room, Ron made a rude gesture at Snape's image, which Harry might have found funny if not for the seriousness of the situation. Nevertheless, Dumbledore continued, we must locate him. Severus, please check the astronomy tower and the dungeons. Minerva, the Gryffindor dormitories and the library. I will search elsewhere. As they dispersed, the window faded back into solid wall. They won't find us here, Harry said confidently. The room won't reveal itself unless we want it to. We can't stay here forever, though, Hermione pointed out practically. The tournament is still ongoing, and your absence will be noticed. I know, Harry sighed. But I need time. These fragments, there's so much information, so many memories. I need to understand what's happening to me before I face Dumbledore again. Then that's what we'll do, Fleur said decisively. I will help you understand the Veela magic that triggered this. Your friends will help you process what's happening. She hesitated. And perhaps we should contact someone who might take your side against Dumbledore. Sirius, Harry said immediately, another fragment supplying knowledge. My godfather. He never got a trial, you know. Dumbledore was chief warlock when he was sent to Azkaban. He could have demanded a trial but didn't. How do you know that? Ron asked, bewildered. One of the fragments was a member of the Wizengamot, Harry explained. He was there when Sirius was arrested. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. There's so much I'm learning, but it's all in pieces. I need time to put it together. Then let's start organizing what we know, Hermione suggested, practical as always. The room obligingly provided parchment, quills, and a large blackboard. What do these fragments tell you about why Dumbledore did this? Harry closed his eyes, concentrating. It's not entirely clear yet. But there are patterns. Many of the fragments have knowledge about specific types of magic, warding, healing, battle magic, ancient rituals. It's like he was, collecting specialties. Creating the perfect weapon, Fleur murmured. A wizard with the combined knowledge of dozens of experts. But why you, Harry? Ron asked. Why not use himself as the container? Another memory surfaced, Dumbledore standing over Harry's crib, murmuring, the prophecy child, already marked by Voldemort's magic, the perfect vessel. I think it had to do with me surviving the killing curse, Harry said slowly. Something about that night made me, compatible with this process. Hermione was writing furiously. So after Voldemort's attack, Dumbledore saw an opportunity. But these soul fragments, they're not like possession, are they? No, Fleur answered before Harry could. Based on what I understand of soul magic, these would be more like echoes. Imprints. Not the full soul, but aspects of it, knowledge, magical affinity, personality traits. That matches what I'm feeling, Harry agreed. They're not trying to take over. It's more like. He searched for an analogy. Like having dozens of teachers in my head, all trying to share their knowledge at once. Is it painful? Hermione asked worriedly. Harry considered this. Not anymore. The initial breaking of the bindings hurt, but now it's just, overwhelming. Like trying to read 20 books simultaneously. The fragments continued to settle as they talked, arranging themselves into something more coherent. Harry could now distinguish them more clearly, a potions mistress from the 1800s, a dueling champion from the early 1900s, a ward specialist who had worked on reinforcing Gringotts, and many more. 29 in total, each with their own specialty and knowledge base. I think I'm starting to understand, Harry said after about an hour of discussion. Dumbledore wasn't just creating a weapon. He was creating a specifically designed counter to Voldemort. Ron frowned. But you know who is gone, isn't he? Harry exchanged a glance with Hermione, who looked equally skeptical. I don't think so, Harry said. Not completely. Why else would Dumbledore be so interested in keeping me under his control? And there's something else. He hesitated. One of the fragments is convinced that my scar contains something dark. Something that isn't a fragment he placed, but something that happened when Voldemort tried to kill me. Fleur moved closer, studying his scar with newfound intensity. May I? She asked, raising her hand. Harry nodded, and she gently placed her fingers near his scar, careful not to actually touch it. Her eyes narrowed in concentration. There is something, she confirmed, her voice hardening. A taint. Not like the fragments, which have now integrated with your core. This is foreign. Malevolent. A piece of Voldemort? Hermione whispered, horrified. It's possible, Fleur said grimly. Though I am not expert enough to confirm. That's why my scar hurts around Quirrell in first year, Harry realized. And why I can speak Parseltongue. It's not just some power transfer, there's actually a piece of him inside me. The room grew silent as they absorbed this disturbing information. We need more help, Hermione finally said. This is beyond what we can handle alone. Sirius, Harry repeated. And maybe Professor Lupin. They both cared about my parents, about me. How do we contact them without Dumbledore knowing? Ron asked. The room provided the answer. A small door appeared in one wall, opening to reveal a cozy orrery with several school owls perched inside. The room truly provides everything we need, Fleur said, impressed. Harry quickly penned a letter to Sirius, explaining as succinctly as possible what had happened and asking him to come to Hogsmeade as soon as he could. He kept it vague enough that if intercepted, it wouldn't reveal too much, but included a code phrase they had established in their previous correspondence. As he sent the owl on its way, Harry felt another shift within him, the fragments settling further, organizing themselves. Knowledge became more accessible, less chaotic. He could now consciously draw on specific fragments rather than being bombarded by all of them at once. I think I'm stabilizing, he told the others, returning to the main room. I can control the access to the fragments' knowledge now. That's good, mate, Ron said, relief evident in his voice. For a while there, you were talking like a 100-year-old professor. I think I have memories from several 100-year-old professors, Harry said with a weak smile. Along with aurors, cursebreakers, healers, and more. Can you use their magic? Hermione asked curiously. Their spells and skills. Harry considered this, then drew his wand. With barely a thought, he accessed the knowledge of a dueling champion and cast a spell he'd never learned. Aegis Reflectum. A shimmering shield materialized before him, far more substantial than the basic protego he'd been struggling to master. Impressive, Fleur acknowledged. But be careful. Knowledge is not the same as practice. Your magic may need time to adjust to these new patterns. She's right, Hermione agreed. Just because you know the theory doesn't mean your magical core has developed the strength or control for advanced spells. Harry nodded, lowering his wand. I'll be careful. But this does mean I have options I didn't have before. He paused, another realization hitting him. Including ways to remove whatever piece of Voldemort is in my scar. That caught everyone's attention. You know how to do that? Ron asked incredulously. Not exactly, Harry admitted. But several of the fragments have knowledge of soul magic, including methods for extracting foreign magical influences. If we research more, combine their knowledge. We should focus on one problem at a time, Hermione cautioned. First, we need to protect you from Dumbledore while you stabilize. Then we can address the Voldemort issue. And the tournament, Ron added. You're still a champion, mate. Harry groaned. I'd almost forgotten about that. He glanced at Fleur. I don't suppose your fire could get me out of the magical contract. She smiled slightly. Unfortunately not. Veela fire can break bindings on a person, but not contractual magic. That operates differently. Worth a try, Harry sighed. So I still have to compete. But now you have the knowledge of 29 magical experts to help you, Hermione pointed out. That should make the tasks easier. True, Harry acknowledged. Though I'm not sure, he stopped abruptly as another memory surfaced, this one more vivid than the others, Dumbledore in conversation with Barty Crouch Sr., just weeks before the tournament began. The fourth pedestal in the selection chamber, you're certain it can be modified? Dumbledore asked. Crouch looked uncomfortable. It's irregular, Albus. The goblet is meant to select 3 champions, 1 from each school. Nevertheless, it can be done. With the right confundus charm. Technically, yes. But why would you want to add a 4th competitor? The 3 champions tradition is less important than ensuring young Potter participates, Dumbledore interrupted smoothly. The signs are clear, Barty. The darkness is returning. The tournament provides an opportunity we cannot ignore. You mean to use a schoolboy as bait? Crouch looked scandalized. I mean to use a controlled environment to flush out our enemies, Dumbledore corrected. Potter's participation is essential. Harry gasped as the memory ended, drawing concerned looks from his friends. What is it? Hermione asked, moving to his side. Dumbledore, Harry said, his voice shaking with anger. He arranged for my name to come out of the goblet. He was working with Crouch to modify the selection magic. Ron's jaw dropped. But, why? Why force you to compete in a tournament that could kill you? Because he's using me as bait, Harry said bitterly. He expects something to happen during the tournament, something involving Voldemort. Fleur's expression darkened. This Dumbledore becomes more despicable with each revelation. In France, the headmistress would be removed immediately for endangering students this way. It's more than that, Harry said, accessing another fragment's knowledge of magical law. Entering someone in a potentially lethal magical contract without their consent is a criminal offense. If this got out, Dumbledore could face charges. Which explains why he was so insistent you had to compete, Hermione realized. He wasn't just upholding the rules, he was covering his own actions. We need evidence, Ron said unexpectedly. When the others looked at him in surprise, he shrugged. What? My dad works for the ministry. I know how these things work. Memories are considered evidence in magical courts, but they can be tampered with. We need corroboration. Crouch, Harry suggested. He knows what Dumbledore did. And Moody, Hermione added. He was an Auror. If we could convince him to help us. Harry frowned as something about Moody triggered another fragment's concern, a fragment that had been an Auror and had known the real Alastair Moody. I'm not sure about Moody, he said slowly. Something feels off about him. What do you mean? Ron asked. I can't put my finger on it yet, Harry admitted. Just a feeling from one of the fragments. We should be careful around him until I can sort it out. A clock on the wall chimed, reminding them that hours had passed. Outside, dinner would be starting in the Great Hall. We should make an appearance, Hermione said reluctantly. If all 4 of us are missing for too long, it will only intensify the search. I'm not sure I'm ready to face everyone, Harry admitted. The fragments are more settled, but I'm still adjusting. Then perhaps just us, Fleur suggested, gesturing to herself, Ron, and Hermione. We can gather information, see what is being said, bring food back for you. Good idea, Ron agreed. I can tell people you're resting after what happened. Not entirely a lie, is it? Harry nodded gratefully. Thank you. All of you. He looked at each of them in turn. I know this is a lot to take in, and I'm asking you to go against Dumbledore. We're with you, Harry, Hermione interrupted firmly. Always. What she said, Ron added. Though I still can't believe Dumbledore would do all this. He's supposed to be the greatest wizard since Merlin. The greatest wizards are often the most dangerous, Fleur said softly. Power corrupts, as they say. As they prepared to leave, Harry caught Fleur's arm gently. Thank you, he said quietly. For helping me understand what's happening. For believing me. Her blue eyes met his, something unreadable in their depths. Your situation is unique, Harry Potter. In all my studies of Veela magic, I have never heard of our fire revealing such extensive magical tampering. She hesitated. I should warn you, there may be more changes coming as the fragments fully integrate. Your magic will be different. More powerful, but also potentially more volatile until you adapt. Harry nodded. I'll be careful. And, maybe you could help me understand more about Veela magic when you return? It seems like something I should know more about, considering. A small smile curved her lips. I would be happy to. It is rare to find a wizard genuinely interested in Veela magic beyond its superficial aspects. After they left, Harry found himself alone in the room of requirement. The fragments had settled enough that he could think more clearly, though occasional bursts of foreign memories still surfaced without warning. He used the time to experiment cautiously with his magic, testing what he could do. The results were both exhilarating and terrifying. Spells that should have been well beyond a fourth-year student came to him easily. Complex transfigurations, advanced charms, even beginning-level curses that weren't taught at Hogwarts, all flowed from his wand with minimal effort. His magical core felt different, expanded somehow, as if the fragments had not only brought knowledge but had physically altered his magical capacity. Most disturbing was the realization that he could now sense magic around him in a way he never could before. The room itself was a swirling vortex of ancient enchantments, layers upon layers of spells woven together over centuries. Even his own wand felt different, he could sense its affinity for him, the way it eagerly conducted his magic. This new sensitivity confirmed something else. There was indeed something dark and foreign in his scar. It pulsed with malevolent energy, distinct from his own magic and from the now integrated fragments. Whatever it was, it didn't belong, and Harry was becoming increasingly certain it was connected directly to Voldemort. He was still experimenting when his friends returned, laden with food from the Great Hall and expressions that ranged from concern to outright anger. It's worse than we thought, Hermione announced as she set down a plate of sandwiches. Dumbledore has announced that you're suffering from magical exhaustion and possible spell damage from exposure to uncontrolled Veela magic. She glanced apologetically at Fleur. His words, not mine. Fleur's eyes flashed dangerously. He dares to blame my heritage. When he is the one who has committed crimes against a child. There's more, Ron said grimly, dropping into a chair. Snape is suggesting you might be experiencing dark influence from the tournament magic interacting badly with your scar. They're setting up a narrative, Harry realized. Trying to discredit anything I might say about the fragments. Precisely, Hermione agreed. And it's working on some people. I overheard Ernie Macmillan telling Hannah Abbott that this proves you shouldn't have been in the tournament in the first place. Not everyone's buying it, though, Ron added quickly. The Weasley twins are saying it's suspicious that Dumbledore is so concerned about you now when he did nothing to prevent you from competing in the first place. And Cedric Diggory was asking about you, Fleur said. He seemed genuinely concerned, not suspicious. Harry processed this information, drawing on the political acumen of several fragments. We need allies, he concluded. People who will believe us over Dumbledore. I've been thinking about that, Hermione said, pulling out a list. Professor Flitwick already seems to be on our side. Professor McGonagall might be persuaded if presented with evidence. And I think Professor Sprout would at least listen, she's always been fair. What about outside the school? Harry asked. The fragments are giving me knowledge, but not connections or influence. My father, Ron said immediately. He's always thought you got a raw deal, Harry. And he's not a big fan of how Dumbledore runs things at Hogwarts, especially after Ginny's first year. My parents would help, Hermione offered, but as Muggles, their influence is limited. My family has connections in France, Fleur said thoughtfully. If things become dire, we could potentially offer sanctuary. The French magical government has a complex relationship with Britain, especially regarding Dumbledore's influence in the ICW. Harry nodded, feeling a plan beginning to form. We need to move carefully. Dumbledore has decades of political capital and is widely trusted. We need irrefutable evidence before we make any public accusations. The memory of him placing fragments in you would be powerful evidence, Hermione pointed out. But memories can be contested, Harry countered, drawing on legal knowledge from a fragment. They'd claim I fabricated it or that it was a side effect of the spell damage they're already suggesting I have. What about the fragments themselves? Ron suggested. Can't they testify or something? Harry shook his head. They're not separate entities anymore. They've integrated with me. It's their knowledge I have access to, not their independent consciousness. Fleur had been quiet, thinking. There might be another approach, she said slowly. Veela magic is recognized by most magical governments as a legitimate form of truth-revealing magic, similar to but distinct from Veritasrum. If I were to use a controlled form of my fire in an official setting. You could prove the fragments exist, Hermione completed, eyes widening. And that would force an investigation into how they got there. It's risky, Fleur cautioned. Veela fire is considered volatile magic by British standards. They might try to use it against me, claim I attacked you. We'll keep that as a last resort, Harry decided. For now, we focus on gathering allies and evidence. He turned to Ron. Can you write to your father? Don't tell him everything, but suggest he might want to visit Hogsmeade soon. Ron nodded. I can do that. Hermione, can you research magical binding and soul magic? See if there are any precedents for what Dumbledore has done. Already planning to, she replied, gesturing to several books the room had provided. And Fleur? Harry hesitated. Would you be willing to teach me more about Veela magic? It might help me understand better what happened when your fire touched me. She inclined her head gracefully. Of course. Though I must warn you, most wizards find Veela magic unsettling. It operates on different principles than wand magic. I think I'm well past being unsettled by different forms of magic, Harry said with a wry smile. As they settled into their tasks, Harry felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time, hope. For years, he had been fumbling through dangers without understanding why they kept finding him. Now, with the fragment's knowledge and his friend's support, he finally had a chance to take control of his own fate. The fragments continued to integrate as the evening progressed. Harry found himself instinctively drawing on their knowledge, his thoughts supplemented by centuries of magical expertise. It was disorienting but increasingly natural, like suddenly remembering things he had forgotten rather than learning something new. One thing became increasingly clear as the fragments settled: Dumbledore had been meticulously crafting him into something specific. The fragments weren't random, they complemented each other, filling gaps in knowledge, creating a comprehensive magical education far beyond what Hogwarts offered. Defense against the dark arts, advanced transfiguration, obscure charms, even limited knowledge of controlled dark arts, all carefully selected to create a particular magical profile. He was building a weapon, Harry murmured, almost to himself. A weapon against Voldemort. What was that, Harry? Hermione asked, looking up from her research. The fragments, Harry explained. They're not random. Together, they create a specific magical toolkit, exactly what you'd need to fight a Dark Lord. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. But why not just teach me properly? Why this this invasive method. Control, Fleur said simply. Teaching takes time, requires cooperation. This way, he could ensure you had exactly the knowledge he wanted you to have, nothing more, nothing less. And he could activate or suppress different fragments as needed, Hermione added, following the logic. Keeping you powerful enough to face Voldemort but not enough to challenge Dumbledore himself. The implications were chilling. How many of Harry's thoughts and feelings over the years had been influenced by these fragments? How much of his personality was truly his own? A sudden spike of pain from his scar interrupted these disturbing thoughts. Harry winced, pressing a hand to his forehead. Harry? Ron asked worriedly. What's wrong? My scar, Harry ground out. Another memory surfaced, but this one felt different, darker, alien. He saw a dimly lit room, a large snake coiled on the floor, and a high, cold voice speaking, Wormtail, our agent reports that Potter has experienced an unexpected magical event. The old fool's plans may be unraveling. What should we do, my lord, came Pettigrew's trembling voice. Nothing changes, the cold voice replied. The tournament proceeds as planned. By year's end, Potter's blood will revive me fully, regardless of what other magic has touched him. Harry gasped as the vision ended, cold sweat breaking out across his forehead. What did you see? Hermione demanded, recognizing the signs of his scar visions from previous occurrences. Harry described the vision, his voice shaking slightly. He knows something happened to me, but he doesn't know what. And he's still planning to use me somehow, something about my blood. A resurrection ritual, Fleur said, her face pale. There are ancient dark rituals that use blood of an enemy to restore a weakened wizard. But Voldemort's dead, Ron protested weakly, though his expression suggested he no longer believed this. No, he's not, Harry said firmly. He's in some kind of weakened form, and he's planning to use the tournament to get to me. Hermione's eyes widened. That's why Dumbledore wanted you in the tournament. He knew Voldemort would try something, and he's using you as bait. Exactly, Harry agreed grimly. And now I need to figure out how to avoid being Dumbledore's pawn without falling into Voldemort's trap instead. The room seemed to respond to his need, as a previously empty bookshelf suddenly filled with tomes on defensive magic and warding. The room is helping us, Ron observed with a touch of awe. Good, Harry said, moving to examine the books. Because we're going to need all the help we can get. As the night deepened, they continued their research, planning, and practice. Harry experimented cautiously with his expanded magical abilities, while Fleur began teaching him the basics of Veela magic, an entirely different magical tradition that operated on principles of emotion and intent rather than precise wand movements and incantations. Hermione excavated the library resources the room provided, occasionally exclaiming over particularly relevant discoveries. Ron, surprisingly, proved adept at strategic thinking, mapping out potential allies and approaches on a large board the room conjured for them. When exhaustion finally overtook them, the room expanded to provide comfortable beds for all four. As Harry drifted toward sleep, he reflected on how much had changed in a single day. This morning, he had been a reluctant tournament champion, fumbling through challenges with minimal preparation and understanding. Now, he was something else entirely, a repository of ancient magical knowledge, a target of not one but two powerful wizards, and potentially the center of a coming storm in the wizarding world. Yet despite the danger and uncertainty, Harry felt more himself than he ever had before. With the bindings broken, he could finally see the manipulation that had shaped his life. And with that awareness came the possibility of true choice, true agency. Whatever Dumbledore had intended him to be, whatever weapon or sacrifice he had been crafting, Harry now had the chance to decide his own fate. The fragments would help, but they wouldn't control him. The path forward was his to choose. As sleep claimed him, Harry's last thought was a simple promise to himself: no more pawns. No more weapons. No more sacrifices. From now on, he would write his own story. Morning arrived with a gentle chiming sound as the room adjusted its lighting to simulate dawn. Harry awoke feeling more rested than he had in years, his mind clearer and the fragments now settled into an organized library of knowledge he could access at will. Hermione was already awake, bent over a parchment covered in notes. Ron snored softly from his bed, while Fleur sat cross-legged on hers, eyes closed in what appeared to be a meditative state. "Good morning," Harry said quietly, sitting up. Hermione looked up with a smile. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Harry replied honestly. "The fragments have settled. I can access them when I need to now, instead of being bombarded constantly." "That's wonderful," Hermione said, setting aside her notes. "I've been researching soul magic all night." "What Dumbledore did?" "Harry, it's classified as a Class A restricted practice by the ICW. The penalties are severe." "If we can prove it," Harry reminded her. "Yes, well, about that." Hermione hesitated. "I've been thinking about Rita Skeeter." Harry blinked in surprise. "Skeeter? Why would we want anything to do with her?" "Because she has no loyalty to Dumbledore," Hermione explained. "And she has a platform. If we could somehow get her to report on this, with evidence, of course, it would be harder for the Ministry to sweep it under the rug." Before Harry could respond, Fleur opened her eyes, the meditative trance apparently complete. "Good morning," she said. "I have been considering our situation. I believe we should contact my headmistress, Madame Maxime." "Why?" Ron asked, awakening and joining the conversation with typical bluntness. "Because she dislikes Dumbledore's methods and would have the diplomatic standing to intervene if necessary," Fleur explained. "As a visiting dignitary, she has certain protections and privileges that could be useful." Harry considered this, drawing on the political knowledge of several fragments. "That's not a bad idea," he admitted. "Having an international perspective would make it harder for the British Ministry to dismiss this as an internal matter." A soft pop announced the arrival of breakfast. The room apparently could not create food, following Gamp's law of elemental transfiguration, a fragment helpfully supplied, but it could transport food that already existed in Hogwarts. As they ate, they discussed their options for the day ahead. Eventually, they agreed on a plan. Hermione would return to Gryffindor Tower to maintain appearances and continue research, Ron would go to the Ollery to send letters to his father and brothers, and Fleur would speak privately with Madame Maxime. "What about you, Harry?" Hermione asked. "I'm going to stay here a bit longer," Harry decided. "I want to work on controlling these new abilities before I face Dumbledore again." After his friends departed, Harry spent the morning in intense practice. Drawing on the knowledge of dueling champions, ward specialists, and transfiguration masters, he pushed his magic in ways he never had before. The results were astonishing. Spells that had once been difficult now came naturally. Complex transfigurations that should have been beyond a fourth-year student materialized with minimal effort. His casting was more precise, more controlled, and significantly more powerful. Most interesting was what happened when he combined knowledge from different fragments, using a dueling technique with a transfiguration approach, or applying arithmetic principles to charms work. The fragments had been selected for their complementary specialties, and Harry found himself creating magical approaches that even the original fragments might not have conceived. Around midday, he felt a subtle shift in the room's magic. Someone was approaching with the intent to enter. Harry tensed, wand at the ready, but relaxed when he sensed it was Fleur. The room had somehow attuned to his magical sensitivity, allowing him to identify visitors. "Harry," Fleur said as she entered, her expression troubled. "I have spoken with Madame Maxime. She is concerned, but cautious. She wishes to meet with you privately before committing to any action." "That's reasonable," Harry acknowledged. "When?" "Tonight, after dinner. She will come here. I have shown her how to access the room." Fleur hesitated. "There is something else. The school is in uproar over your disappearance. Dumbledore has announced that you are in a secure location receiving medical treatment, but rumors are spreading. What kind of rumors? Some say you have been possessed by dark magic. Others claim the tournament has damaged your mind. A few even suggest you are undergoing some kind of magical transformation. She gave a wry smile. That last one is not entirely incorrect. Harry sighed. I can't hide forever. I'll have to face them eventually. Yes, but not until you are ready, Fleur insisted. The fragments have settled, but have you considered what you will say to Dumbledore when you see him? What you will do? It was a fair question. Despite everything he had learned, the thought of confronting Dumbledore, Albus Dumbledore, the greatest wizard of the age, chief warlock, supreme mugwump, was intimidating. I'm not sure yet, Harry admitted. Part of me wants to call him out publicly, force him to answer for what he's done. But another part recognizes that might not be the wisest approach. Indeed, Fleur agreed. Dumbledore has spent a lifetime building his reputation and influence. A direct confrontation might not end in your favor, regardless of who is in the right. So what then? Pretend nothing has happened. Let him continue to manipulate me. No, Fleur said firmly. But perhaps a more strategic approach is needed. Her expression softened slightly. You have the knowledge of many powerful witches and wizards now, Harry. What would they advise? Harry closed his eyes, consulting the fragments. Political strategies, diplomatic approaches, and cunning plots all presented themselves. One in particular, from a witch who had navigated the treacherous waters of 18th-century magical politics, seemed especially relevant. When facing a more powerful opponent, Harry quoted slowly, "Never attack where they expect. Instead, build your strength quietly, gather allies carefully, and strike only when you can change the rules of engagement." Fleur nodded approvingly. Wise advice. So I play along, Harry concluded. Let Dumbledore think his story about magical exhaustion is working. Meanwhile, we gather evidence and allies. For now, yes, Fleur agreed. But not forever. Eventually, there must be a reckoning. The door opened again, admitting Hermione and Ron. Both looked worried. Dumbledore called an all-school assembly, Hermione reported breathlessly. He's telling everyone that you've been affected by a rare magical interaction between the tournament's magic and residual effects from your encounter with Voldemort as a baby. He's laying the groundwork to discredit anything you might say, Ron added grimly. Setting it up so if you accuse him, people will think it's the magical damage talking. Classic misdirection, Harry noted, drawing on another fragment's knowledge of manipulation tactics. Create an alternative explanation before the truth can emerge. There's something else, Hermione said hesitantly. I think someone's been searching my things. Books I had out for research on soul magic were rearranged. Dumbledore's watching you, Harry realized. He suspects you know something. What do we do? Ron asked. Harry thought for a moment, then made a decision. We change tactics. Hiding is becoming more suspicious than appearing. I'll return to Gryffindor Tower tonight, act as though I've been in the hospital wing all this time. But Harry, Hermione protested, if Dumbledore gets you alone, he won't try anything obvious, Harry assured her. Not now, not with so much attention on me. And I'm stronger than I was before. He didn't add the other reason for his decision, the longer he hid, the more time Dumbledore had to prepare countermeasures. If you're returning to your dormitory, then I will speak with some of my Beauxbatons classmates, Fleur decided. Several come from families with political connections that could be useful. And I'll contact my brothers, Ron added. Bill knows about curse-breaking and ancient magic, and Percy works at the ministry, he might hear things. While I continue researching, Hermione concluded. But more discreetly now. As they finalized their plans, Harry felt a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. He was stepping into a dangerous game against one of the most powerful wizards alive. Yet for the first time, he wasn't entering the arena unprepared. He had knowledge, allies, and most importantly, awareness of the manipulation that had shaped his life. Whatever happened next, Harry Potter was no longer a pawn in someone else's game. And that, more than all the magical knowledge in the world, might prove to be his greatest advantage. Chapter 2, Fragments of Truth. Harry found himself facing the fat lady's portrait sooner than he'd expected. The corridor was deserted, everyone was at dinner in the great hall. He'd deliberately chosen this moment to make his reappearance, hoping to avoid a public spectacle. "Password?" the fat lady asked, then did a double take. "Potter. Goodness, there've been all sorts of rumors about you." "Fairy lights," Harry replied, ignoring her curiosity. She huffed but swung open. "Don't expect me to be your alibi, young man." The common room was nearly empty, just a couple of first years who gaped at him before scurrying away, no doubt to spread word of his return. Harry climbed the stairs to his dormitory, finding it mercifully empty. He sat on his bed, fingers tracing the familiar hangings, and took a deep breath. He was back in the lion's den, and soon he'd have to face the Inquisition. Inside his trunk, Harry found the Marauder's map and activated it, searching for a specific dot. There, Albus Dumbledore, in the great hall at the high table. Good. It gave Harry time to prepare. He hadn't been sitting there long when the dormitory door burst open. Ron entered first, followed by Neville, Dean, and Seamus. "Harry!" Neville exclaimed. "You're back. Are you all right?" "Everyone's talking about what happened during the first task," Dean added. Seamus hung back slightly, his expression guarded. "Dumbledore said you had some kind of magical reaction." Harry had prepared for this. Drawing on one fragment's diplomatic knowledge, he gave them a smile that was open but not too energetic. "Yeah, apparently Fleur's Veela fire interacted with some residual magic from when I was a baby. Nothing serious, just needed some time to settle." "Doesn't look like nothing serious to me," Seamus observed skeptically. "You look different." Harry hadn't realized there would be visible changes, but a quick assessment confirmed Seamus was right. He felt more centered in his body, his movements more deliberate. The fragments had affected not just his mind but his magical aura, which subtle shifts in how he carried himself. "Just tired," Harry deflected. "It's been a strange few days." Ron, playing his part perfectly, flopped onto his own bed. "Well, you didn't miss much. Just everyone making up wild theories about where you were. The Slytherins think you were growing a second head or something." The others laughed, tension breaking. Soon they were filling Harry in on mundane school matters, classes he'd missed, Quidditch practice, which continued despite the tournament, and the latest gossip. Harry nodded along, grateful for the semblance of normalcy. When they finally headed down to the common room, Harry felt dozens of eyes turn toward him. The whispers started immediately. "He doesn't look cursed. Something different about him though. Heard Delacour's fire nearly killed him." Hermione pushed through the crowd, embracing him with convincing relief. "Harry! We've been so worried." He returned the hug, whispering, "Dumbledore." Still at dinner, she murmured back before pulling away. "How are you feeling?" she asked loudly for the benefit of onlookers. "Better," Harry replied. "Just needed rest." Gryffindors gathered around, peppering him with questions. Harry answered vaguely, sticking to his story about magical exhaustion and residual effects. Most seemed to accept this, though he noticed Ginny Weasley watching him with unusual intensity, her brown eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Fred and George approached last, identical grins on their faces that didn't quite reach their eyes. "Interesting vacation you took, Harry," Fred said lightly. "Very selective guest list," George added. "We're a bit hurt we weren't invited." Harry smiled slightly. "Maybe next time." They exchanged glances. "We've got something that might interest you," Fred murmured, pressing a small package into Harry's hand. "Just a little project we've been working on. Detects certain types of magical eavesdropping." Harry pocketed it with a nod of thanks. The twins' inventiveness was proving increasingly valuable. As the excitement over his return died down, Harry settled into an armchair by the fire, feigning relaxation while remaining hyper-aware of his surroundings. The fragments had given him not just knowledge but instincts, and those instincts were telling him to stay vigilant. He didn't have to wait long. The portrait hole opened, and Professor McGonagall stepped through, her eyes immediately finding Harry. "Mr. Potter," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "The headmaster would like to see you in his office." Here it was, the confrontation he'd been preparing for. "Now, Professor?" "Yes, Potter. Now." Her expression softened slightly. "Are you feeling well enough?" "I'm fine, Professor," Harry assured her, rising from his chair. "Lead the way." As they walked through the corridors, McGonagall maintained a professional silence. Only when they were halfway to Dumbledore's office did she speak. "That was quite a display of magic during the first task, Miss Delacour's fire reaching you like that." She glanced sideways at him. "Most unusual." Harry sensed she was fishing for information. "Yes, Professor. I'm still not entirely sure what happened." "Indeed." She stopped walking, turning to face him directly. "Potter, if there is anything at all, that you need assistance with, my door is always open to you." The offer seemed genuine. Harry studied his head of house, drawing on a fragment's knowledge of aura reading. McGonagall's magical signature showed concern and integrity, with no trace of the manipulative patterns he now recognized in Dumbledore's magic. "Thank you, Professor," he said sincerely. "I appreciate that." They continued to Dumbledore's office in silence. At the gargoyle, McGonagall gave the password, "Pepper Imps," but did not accompany him up the spiral staircase. "Good luck, Potter," she said quietly as he stepped onto the first stair. Harry climbed slowly, using the time to organize his thoughts. The fragments offered different approaches: confrontation, deception, partial truth. He settled on a strategy of controlled revelation, admitting to some effects of Fleur's fire while concealing the full extent of his knowledge. "Enter," Dumbledore called before Harry could knock. The headmaster's office was as Harry remembered: silver instruments whirring on spindly tables, portraits of former headmasters, most pretending to sleep while clearly observing, and Fawkes on his perch, watching Harry with intelligent eyes. Dumbledore himself sat behind his desk, blue eyes twinkling though his expression was grave. "Harry, my boy. I'm relieved to see you well. You gave us quite a scare." Harry took the offered seat across from Dumbledore, immediately noting the subtle magic in the chair, calming enchantments designed to make the occupant more suggestible. Drawing on a fragment's knowledge of warding, he quietly negated the effect while maintaining his outward appearance of compliance. "I'm sorry for the trouble, sir," Harry said, injecting his voice with just the right amount of contrition. "I didn't mean to disappear like that." "Quite understandable, given the circumstances." Dumbledore steepled his fingers. "Perhaps you could tell me what happened after Miss Delacour's fire touched you." Madame Pomfrey was most concerned about the magical interactions. Harry felt a gentle probe against his mental defenses, not a full legilimency attack, but a subtle attempt to assess his thoughts. Thanks to the fragments, he now recognized what had previously been invisible to him: Dumbledore's regular use of passive legilimency on students. "It was strange, Professor," Harry began, projecting thoughts of confusion and disorientation while keeping his true memories shielded. "When the fire touched me, it felt like something broke inside. I saw flashes of memories, my parents, Voldemort, fragments of things I didn't recognize." Dumbledore's expression remained calm, but Harry noticed a slight tension in his shoulders. "And these memories, Harry, did they seem like your own?" "Some did, some didn't," Harry replied truthfully. "It was confusing. Fleur said something about Veela fire having purifying properties." "Indeed." Dumbledore rose, moving to stroke Fawkes. "Veela magic is ancient and not fully understood by modern wizardry. It can interact unpredictably with other magical influences. He turned, fixing Harry with a penetrating gaze. Have you noticed any other effects? Changes in your magic, perhaps? Harry allowed a flicker of genuine concern to show. My spells do feel different, stronger, somehow. And I've been having strange dreams. Dreams? Dumbledore returned to his seat, leaning forward with apparent concern. What kind of dreams, Harry? About Voldemort, Harry said, deciding to offer this truth as a distraction. I saw him talking to Wormtail about the tournament, about using me somehow. This caught Dumbledore's full attention. Tell me everything you remember. Harry described the vision exactly as he'd seen it, watching Dumbledore's reaction carefully. The headmaster showed appropriate concern, but Harry detected something else, a calculating assessment, as if the information was being fitted into existing plans. Most troubling, Dumbledore murmured when Harry finished. The connection between you and Voldemort has always been unusual. Miss Delacour's fire may have inadvertently strengthened it. Sir, Harry ventured, what exactly is this connection? Why can I see into Voldemort's mind? Dumbledore sighed heavily. I had hoped to wait until you were older to burden you with this knowledge, Harry. But perhaps recent events have forced our hand. He gazed at Harry over his half-moon spectacles. When Voldemort tried to kill you as a baby, the rebounding curse created a connection between you. A magical link that allows, in moments of high emotion or proximity, a certain bleed-through of thoughts and experiences. It was a partial truth, enough to explain the visions without revealing the true nature of the Horcrux in Harry's scar. Harry nodded as if accepting this explanation, while internally categorizing it as another of Dumbledore's carefully constructed half-truths. Is there any way to block it? Harry asked. To stop these visions? I believe a clemency might help, Dumbledore replied. It is the magical art of shielding one's mind. However, it requires considerable practice and discipline. He paused thoughtfully. Perhaps Professor Snape could. I'd prefer to learn from someone else, if possible, Harry interrupted, unable to hide his aversion to the idea. Professor Snape and I have a complicated relationship. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. Very well. I might be able to arrange some basic instruction myself, though my schedule is rather full. He studied Harry carefully. In the meantime, Harry, I must ask that you be cautious with your magic. These changes you're experiencing, they could be volatile until fully stabilized. It would be prudent to avoid advanced spell work for the time being. Translation, don't explore your new abilities where I can't monitor you. Yes, sir, Harry agreed outwardly. I'll be careful. They spoke for a while longer, discussing the tournament and Harry's return to classes. Throughout, Harry maintained his facade of mild confusion and reasonable cooperation, while Dumbledore continued his gentle attempts to assess Harry's mental state and magical condition. Finally, Dumbledore rose, indicating their meeting was concluded. I'm glad to see you recovering well, Harry. Please come to me immediately if you experience any unusual effects from this incident. I will, Professor, Harry promised, knowing he would do no such thing. As he reached the door, Dumbledore added casually, "Oh, and Harry? I understand Miss Delacour has been quite concerned about you. While her interest is understandable given her inadvertent role in this situation, would caution against spending too much time with her." Harry turned, feigning confusion. Sir. Veela magic is potent, Harry, especially for young wizards. It can be influential, often without either party realizing it. Dumbledore's expression was benevolently concerned. I merely suggest keeping some distance until we better understand how her magic has affected yours. Attempting to isolate him from Fleur, one of the few people who truly understood what had happened. Harry wasn't surprised, but the blatant manipulation still stoked his anger. I'll keep that in mind, Professor, he said neutrally, then left before his emotions could betray him. As the gargoyle closed behind him, Harry exhaled slowly. The meeting had gone as well as could be expected. Dumbledore suspected something but couldn't confirm his worst fears. For now, the balance remained precarious. Harry checked his watch, still time to make the meeting with Madame Maxime. He headed toward the 7th floor, taking a circuitous route to avoid being followed. When he reached the room of requirement, he found Fleur already waiting inside with her headmistress. Madame Maxime's imposing figure made the room seem suddenly smaller, but her expression was more curious than intimidating. "Ah, Monsieur Potter," she greeted him in her thick French accent. "Miss Delacour has told me a most unusual story." "It's all true, madam," Harry replied, closing the door behind him. "Though I understand your skepticism. I do not doubt something significant happened," Maxime said carefully. "The question is what, precisely, and what it means." She studied him with shrewd eyes. "You appear changed from when I first saw you at the wand-weighing ceremony. Your magic, it feels different." "It is different," Harry confirmed. "Professor Dumbledore has been placing soul fragments in me since I was an infant." Fleur's fire broke the bindings holding them. Maxime's expression darkened. "Soul magic performed on a child is forbidden by international magical law. You understand the seriousness of this accusation?" "Completely," Harry assured her. "I have the memories of Dumbledore performing the ritual. Multiple times, with different soul fragments." "Memories can be altered," Maxime pointed out. "Which is why I need allies who can help prove what happened," Harry countered. "People with political influence outside Dumbledore's direct control." Madame Maxime considered him for a long moment. "What exactly are you asking of me, Monsieur Potter?" "Your protection, if necessary," Harry replied honestly. "And your testimony regarding the changes in my magic following contact with Veela fire. You're a respected magical authority figure from outside Britain, your observations would carry weight. And what do you intend to do with this proof, should you obtain it?" Harry exchanged glances with Fleur. "Initially, secure my own safety and autonomy. Eventually, hold Dumbledore accountable for his actions." "You aim very high for one so young," Maxime observed. "Dumbledore has many powerful allies." "He also has enemies," Harry countered. "People who would welcome evidence of his misdeeds." "True," Maxime acknowledged. "But dangerous allies can be worse than enemies, Monsieur Potter." Harry nodded, drawing on a fragment's political wisdom. "I don't intend to become a pawn in someone else's game again, madam. I'm seeking justice, not revenge." This seemed to satisfy her. "Very well. I will observe and document the changes in your magic. If what you claim is proven to my satisfaction, I will consider further assistance." She rose to her full height, towering over them both. "Be cautious, Monsieur Potter. You play a dangerous game." After she left, Fleur turned to Harry. "That went better than I expected. Madame Maxime is not easily convinced, but she is fair." "I hope so," Harry sighed, dropping into a chair. "Because Dumbledore definitely suspects something. He tried to warn me away from you, said Veela magic could be influential." Fleur's expression hardened. Of course he would say that. Many wizards fear what they do not understand, especially magic tied to female power. She sat across from him. "How are the fragments now?" "More settled," Harry replied. "I can access them more deliberately. It's like having a library in my head that I can browse at will." He hesitated. "There's something else. When I met with McGonagall and Dumbledore, I could sense their magic, actually see the patterns of it around them." "Magical sight," Fleur breathed. "That's rare, even among Veela. One of the fragments must have had the ability, and my fire activated it in you. Is that normal? For Veela fire to enhance latent magical traits?" "Veela fire reveals what is true but hidden," Fleur explained. "It burns away deception and constraint. If this ability was suppressed in you, either naturally or by Dumbledore's bindings, the fire would have freed it. Harry nodded slowly. That makes sense. I'm discovering new abilities almost hourly as the fragments continue to integrate. Show me, Fleur requested. Harry stood, drawing his wand. With a fluid motion that would have been beyond his capability days ago, he cast a series of spells in rapid succession. A spectral phoenix erupted from his wand, circled the room in a blaze of light, then transformed into a shower of golden sparks that coalesced into a three-dimensional map of Hogwarts, complete with tiny moving dots representing people. An advanced form of the Marauder's map, Harry explained as Fleur gazed at it in wonder. One of the fragments was a cartographer who specialized in magical mapping. Impressive, Fleur acknowledged. And potentially very useful. Harry waved his wand again, and the map vanished. There's more, but I'm still learning to control it all. He hesitated. Fleur, when we first met, did you sense anything unusual about me? Before your fire touched me, I mean. She considered this. There was something off. Like your magic was muffled, contained. I thought perhaps it was just the difference between British and continental magical education. She studied him curiously. Why do you ask? I'm trying to understand who might have noticed what Dumbledore was doing, Harry explained. If you could sense it, maybe others could too. Perhaps, Fleur agreed. Though Veela are particularly sensitive to magical constraints. It offends our nature. She rose gracefully. I should go. Curfew approaches, and my absence would be noted. Thank you, Harry said sincerely. For everything. Fleur paused at the door. We are allies now, Harry Potter. Perhaps even friends. A small smile curved her lips. Besides, I find myself curious to see what becomes of a wizard touched by Veela fire. It has not happened in living memory. After she left, Harry remained in the room, practicing spells and sorting through the fragments' knowledge. He was particularly interested in what they could tell him about the Horcrux in his scar, for that's what it was, he now knew. One fragment, a wizard who had studied dark magic in Egypt during the 1800s, had extensive knowledge of soul containers. The news wasn't good. Horcruxes were nearly indestructible, and removing one typically required destroying its container, in this case, Harry himself. There must be another way, he muttered, paging through mental archives of arcane knowledge. Several fragments offered possible approaches, ancient Egyptian rituals, goblin purification ceremonies, even theoretical applications of Veela fire. None were guaranteed, but together they suggested possibilities worth exploring. Harry was deep in research when the room alerted him to another visitor. To his surprise, the magical signature wasn't one he recognized. Cautiously, he disillusioned himself and moved to a defensive position. The door opened to reveal a large black dog, which quickly transformed into Sirius Black. Harry? Sirius called, looking around the seemingly empty room. Are you here? Harry cancelled the disillusionment charm. Sirius. How did you know where to find me? His godfather grinned, though his eyes remained serious. I helped create the Marauder's map, remember? James and I discovered this room in our 5th year. His expression grew concerned as he approached Harry. Your letter was troubling, to say the least. What's this about Dumbledore and soul fragments? For the next hour, Harry explained everything, the fragments, Dumbledore's manipulations, his new abilities, and the Horcrux in his scar. Sirius listened intently, his expression growing darker with each revelation. That manipulative old bastard, he growled when Harry finished. I always knew he played his cards close to the chest, but this. He shook his head in disbelief. Using a child as a repository for soul fragments? It's unconscionable. You believe me, then? Harry asked, relief evident in his voice. Of course I believe you, Sirius replied fiercely. James and Lily would never have trusted Dumbledore with you if they'd known what he was planning. And it explains too much, why he left you with those awful muggles, why he never pushed for my trial, why he's kept you in the dark about so many things. Harry hadn't realized how much he needed this validation until he felt tears prickling behind his eyes. "Thank you," he said simply. Sirius squeezed his shoulder. "We're family, Harry. The last of it. We stick together." His expression turned calculating. "Now, we need a plan. Dumbledore has too much power and influence for a direct confrontation." "That's what I've been thinking," Harry agreed. "We need to build allies and gather evidence before making any public accusations." "Smart," Sirius approved. "And we need to get you legally out from under his control. As long as he's your magical guardian, he has too much authority over your life." "Can you challenge that?" Harry asked. "As my godfather?" "Possibly," Sirius mused. "My legal status is complicated, but not impossible to work with. I know people who can help, people who owe the House of Black favors." They spent the next few hours plotting strategy. Sirius had connections in unexpected places, old pureblood families, foreign ministries, even a few contacts in the Department of Mysteries who might be interested in examining the effects of the fragments. "The key," Sirius explained, "is building a coalition diverse enough that Dumbledore can't easily discredit or control it. We need purebloods and progressives, British and international voices, academics and politicians." Harry was impressed by his godfather's strategic thinking. "I didn't realize you were so politically savvy." Sirius gave a bark of laughter. "I was raised a black, Harry. Politics is mother's milk to my family, even for the black sheep." His expression sobered. "Besides, 12 years in Azkaban gives you plenty of time to think about how the system works, and how it fails." By the time they finished planning, it was well past midnight. Sirius transformed back into his animagus form to leave, promising to return in a few days with news. As Harry made his way back to Gryffindor Tower under his invisibility cloak, he felt more hopeful than he had in days. Sirius wasn't just on his side, he was actively working to help, bringing resources and connections Harry hadn't even considered. The common room was deserted when Harry entered, except for Hermione, who sat waiting by the dying fire. "How did it go?" she asked as he removed the cloak. "Better than expected," Harry told her, recounting his meetings with Dumbledore, Madame Maxime, and Sirius. "We're building a network, Hermione. People who can stand against Dumbledore if necessary." "Good," she said, then hesitated. "Harry, there's something I need to tell you. I've been doing some research on your scar, the Horcrux problem. And I think there might be a way to remove it without harming you," she said cautiously. "It's theoretical, but..." She pushed a book across the table. "Look at this." Harry examined the passage she indicated. It described a ritual used by ancient Mesopotamian mages to draw parasitic spirits from possessed victims. "This is promising," he admitted, fragments of knowledge assessing the ritual's components. "But it would need adaptation for a Horcrux. They're more deeply embedded than possession." "I thought so too," Hermione agreed eagerly. "But what if we combined it with elements of Veela purification rituals? Fleur's fire already proved effective against Dumbledore's bindings, it might work on the Horcrux too." Harry stared at her, impressed. "That's brilliant, Hermione. How did you even make that connection?" She blushed slightly. "I think it's the fragment's influence, like you said. Ever since I've been around you after the fire, my mind works differently. Like mental blocks I didn't even know existed have been removed. Dumbledore's constraints are weakening," Harry realized. "Being around me is accelerating the process." "Not just me," Hermione added. "Ron's tactical thinking has improved dramatically. And Ginny mentioned that her nightmares about the chamber have stopped." Harry frowned, connecting dots he hadn't seen before. "Dumbledore must have placed similar constraints on anyone close to me. Limiting your abilities, reinforcing Ron's insecurities, even suppressing Ginny's healing from her possession. Anger flared in him. He's been manipulating all of us. But it's breaking down now, Hermione pointed out. Your freed magic is affecting those around you, especially those who've been manipulated themselves. This was an unexpected development, and potentially a powerful advantage. If Harry's presence was freeing others from Dumbledore's influence. We need to be strategic about this, he said thoughtfully. Spend time with key people, help break their constraints without being obvious about it. Like who? Neville, for one, Harry replied immediately. His magical struggles never made sense given his family's power. And the Weasley twins, their inventiveness suggests significant magical talent that could be even stronger without constraints. We could form a study group, Hermione suggested. A reason to gather regularly without arousing suspicion. Perfect, Harry agreed. We'll call it. He thought for a moment. The Defense Association. Everyone knows Moody's teaching is erratic. We can claim we're supplementing our defense education. Hermione nodded enthusiastically. I'll start recruiting tomorrow. As they headed up to their dormitories, Harry felt a surge of optimism. What had started as a personal struggle against Dumbledore's manipulation was evolving into something larger, a movement to free others from subtle magical constraints they didn't even know existed. For the first time since Fleur's fire had touched him, Harry felt truly excited about the possibilities ahead. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Harry returned to classes, maintaining his cover story of magical exhaustion while secretly working with his growing circle of allies. The Defense Association formed quickly, with a core group that included not just Gryffindors but students from Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw as well. Luna Lovegood joined immediately, stating matter-of-factly that she'd always known something was interfering with people's natural magical development. Her otherworldly perspective proved unexpectedly valuable in identifying subtle magical constraints. Fleur brought several Beauxbatons students who had expressed skepticism about Dumbledore's version of events, including her friend Sophie Moreau, whose family had connections in the French Magical Senate. Most surprising was Cedric Diggory's enthusiastic participation. The Hufflepuff champion approached Harry after Transfiguration one day, expressing not jealousy but concern. I saw what happened during the first task, Potter, he said quietly. That wasn't normal magic. And you've been different since, more focused, more confident. He hesitated. My father works at the Ministry. He says Dumbledore's been making inquiries about obscure magical laws regarding guardianship of magically affected minors. Has he now? Harry replied, filing this information away. And what do you think about all this, Cedric? Cedric studied him thoughtfully. I think there's more going on than we're being told. And I think you deserve a fair shot at figuring it out without interference. He extended his hand. I want to help, if you'll let me. Harry accepted the handshake, sensing no deception in Cedric's magic. Come to the room of requirement tonight at 8. 7th floor, across from the tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy. The Defense Association quickly became more than just a cover for their real activities. Harry, drawing on the Fragments' knowledge, proved to be an exceptional teacher. Students who had struggled with defensive magic for years suddenly found themselves mastering complex spells under his guidance. It's not just the instruction, Hermione observed after one particularly successful session. Your presence is actually affecting their magic, breaking down whatever constraints Dumbledore placed on them. Harry had noticed it too, the visible brightening of magical auras as students spent time around him, the increasing ease with which they performed spells that had once been difficult. Even more interesting were the side effects. Neville's chronic forgetfulness diminished dramatically. The Weasley twins reported breakthroughs in magical products they'd been stuck on for months. Luna's seemingly nonsensical statements began to reveal startling insights that proved accurate with disturbing frequency. It's like we've all been seeing through foggy glasses for years, Ginny remarked during one session. And suddenly everything's clear. Not everyone was pleased with these developments. Dumbledore watched Harry with increasing concern during meals, though he made no direct move to interfere. Snape became more vitriolic in potions, clearly disturbed by Harry's newfound composure and competence. And Moody's magical eye followed Harry constantly, its gaze calculating rather than merely vigilant. Harry's suspicions about the defense professor intensified when one of the fragments, an Auror who had worked with the real Moody in the 1970s, noted discrepancies in his behavior. "His mannerisms are wrong," Harry told Hermione and Ron in private. "The way he handles his wand, the phrases he uses, they're close, but not quite right." "You think someone's impersonating him?" Ron asked, alarmed. "But why?" "I don't know yet," Harry admitted. "But I intend to find out." Meanwhile, Fleur continued helping Harry explore his connection to Veela magic. The fire that had touched him had left traces, altering his magical signature in subtle ways that allowed him to sense and sometimes influence emotional energies. "It is not the allure," Fleur explained during one of their private sessions in the Room of Requirement. "That is unique to Veela. But it is similar, a sensitivity to emotional currents, an ability to nudge feelings rather than control them." "Is that why people seem more receptive around me now?" Harry asked. "More willing to question things they previously accepted?" "Partly," Fleur confirmed. "Your presence creates a sort of, how do you say, purification field. It counters manipulative magic, allows people to think more clearly." She studied him with professional interest. "I believe it is the combination of the Veela fire's properties with the fragment's knowledge. Together, they have created something unique." Harry practiced this new sensitivity carefully, learning to distinguish between different types of magical influences. He could now identify when someone was under a compulsion charm or confundus effect, could sense the subtle threads of loyalty potions and memory modifications. What he discovered disturbed him deeply. Minor magical manipulations were everywhere at Hogwarts. Students and staff alike carried traces of memory charms, behavioral adjustments, emotional dampeners. Most were subtle, almost undetectable without his enhanced senses, but their cumulative effect was profound, a school population that accepted inconsistencies and dangers that should have provoked outrage. "It's not just me he's been manipulating," Harry realized. "It's the entire school. Maybe the entire wizarding world." The implications were staggering. How long had Dumbledore been subtly adjusting people's perceptions and reactions? How much of Wizarding Britain's complacency and illogical traditions were natural, and how much engineered? Harry shared these discoveries with his inner circle, Hermione, Ron, Fleur, Sirius, during his clandestine visits, and now Neville, whose confidence had grown exponentially as the constraints on his magic weakened. "My gran always said Dumbledore had too much power," Neville commented. 3 major positions, Headmaster, Chief Warlock, Supreme Mugwump, all controlling different aspects of magical society. "Perfect for someone with a long-term plan," Sirius agreed grimly. "Educational influence through Hogwarts, legislative control via the Wisengamot, and international cooperation through the ICW. But what is his plan?" Ron asked, voicing the question they'd all been circling. "What's the end game?" "I think it has to do with Voldemort," Harry said slowly. "The fragments were specifically chosen to create a weapon against him. But not just to defeat him in a particular way." "What way?" Hermione pressed. Harry frowned, sorting through the fragment's knowledge. "I'm not entirely sure yet. But it involves my blood, my mother's sacrifice, and—" He hesitated, "and my death, I think." The room fell silent at this chilling assessment. "Not happening," Ron said flatly, breaking the silence. "Whatever Dumbledore planned, we're changing the script." "Agreed," Fleur said fiercely. "But to do that, we must understand his plan completely. And deal with the Horcrux in my scar," Harry added. "As long as it's there, I'm vulnerable, to both Voldemort and Dumbledore." Hermione had been continuing her research on this problem, combining academic study with insights from the fragment's knowledge that filtered through her time with Harry. I think I've found something promising, she announced, pulling out a notebook filled with complex diagrams. A combination ritual drawing on 3 magical traditions, Veela purification rites, ancient Egyptian soul magic, and surprisingly, goblin warding techniques. Harry examined her notes with growing excitement. This could work, he said, fragments of knowledge assessing the ritual components. It targets the foreign soul fragment specifically, without damaging the host container. It would require significant power, Fleur cautioned, reviewing the design. And precise execution. And ingredients that won't be easy to obtain, Sirius added, pointing to several items on the list. Freely given phoenix tears. Basilisk venom. Where are we supposed to get those? I know where to find basilisk venom, Harry said. There's a massive dead basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets. As for phoenix tears. He considered the problem. Fawkes helped me in the chamber. He might be willing to help again, especially since this involves destroying a piece of Voldemort. Can phoenixes understand human speech? Ron wondered. Not exactly, Harry replied, drawing on a fragment's knowledge of magical creatures. But they can sense intent and purpose. If we can communicate what we're trying to do. Planning the ritual became their priority. They would need a safe, magically powerful location, rare ingredients, and several participants with specific magical skills. The timing would be crucial too, certain astronomical alignments would strengthen the ritual's efficacy. The next optimal alignment is in 3 weeks, Hermione calculated. Just before the second task. Perfect, Harry decided. If it works, I'll face the task without Voldemort's influence for the first time. While they prepared for the ritual, Harry continued building his network of allies and gathering evidence against Dumbledore. Sirius proved invaluable, using old Black family connections to make discreet inquiries about Dumbledore's past activities and legal vulnerabilities. The old man's been busy, Sirius reported during one meeting. My contact at Gringotts confirmed unusual activity in your family vault after your parents died, items removed, transfers made, all authorized by Dumbledore as your magical guardian. Can we prove it was illegal? Harry asked. Working on it, Sirius replied. Goblins keep meticulous records, but they're reluctant to get involved in wizard disputes. We need leverage. Leverage came from an unexpected source. Professor Flitwick, whose assistance during Harry's escape after the first task had been invaluable, approached Harry after a particularly successful charms lesson. Mr. Potter, a moment please, he requested as the other students filed out. Harry remained behind, noting Flitwick's serious expression. Your magical control has improved remarkably, the diminutive professor observed once they were alone. Far beyond what one would expect from simple practice. Harry tensed, unsure how much to reveal. Flitwick smiled gently. You needn't worry. I have no intention of reporting your progress to the headmaster. His expression grew serious. In fact, I've been hoping to speak with you about certain concerns I've had regarding magical influences at Hogwarts. What kind of concerns, Professor? Harry asked cautiously. The kind that a wizard with goblin heritage finds particularly disturbing, Flitwick replied. Subtle compulsions, memory modifications, magical bindings on students. He fixed Harry with a penetrating gaze. Especially on you, Mr. Potter. Though I note those bindings appear to have been broken recently. Harry made a quick decision. Professor, how much do you know about Veela fire? Quite a bit, actually, Flitwick responded. My doctoral thesis at the Magical Academy of Vienna focused on non-human magical traditions, including Veela rituals. Then you might understand what happened during the first task, Harry suggested. Flitwick nodded slowly. Miss Delacour's fire touched you and broke through magical bindings someone had placed on you. His expression darkened. Bindings that should never have been placed on a child, regardless of the intention behind them. Would you be willing to document your observations? Harry asked. As an expert witness? A fierce light entered the professor's eyes. Mr. Potter, I would be delighted to. The magical suppression of children goes against everything I believe as an educator. He lowered his voice. And I am not the only staff member with concerns. Professor Sprout has noticed accelerated growth in her plants when certain students are present in the greenhouses, a sign of freed magic affecting living things. This was better than Harry had hoped. Professor, would you be willing to meet with a few others who share these concerns? We're gathering information, building a case. A case against Albus Dumbledore, Flitwick stated plainly. When Harry didn't deny it, he sighed. I've respected Albus for decades, but I've also questioned some of his methods. Yes, Mr. Potter, I will meet with your group. With Flitwick's support came access to resources they hadn't previously considered, ancient Ravenclaw texts on magical theory, contacts in the Goblin Nation who might assist with the ritual, even suggestions for navigating the complex legal issues involved in challenging a magical guardian. The final piece of their preparation fell into place when Luna Lovegood approached Harry after a DA meeting, her protuberant eyes even dreamier than usual. The tears you need, she said without preamble. Fawkes will provide them, but not directly to you. Too many Raxperts around you, makes him nervous. Harry had learned not to dismiss Luna's strange pronouncements. Who should ask him, then? Me, she replied simply. Phoenixes and I understand each other. Daddy wrote an article about their secret language. She smiled serenely. Don't worry, Harry Potter. The Firebird knows what lives in your scar. He wants it gone as much as you do. True to her word, Luna returned 2 days later with a small crystal vial containing pearly phoenix tears. He was quite cooperative, she reported. Though he says Dumbledore is becoming suspicious of his absences. We should proceed quickly. With all the components gathered, they scheduled the ritual for the night before the new moon, when the boundary between physical and spiritual realms would be thinnest. The chosen location was the Chamber of Secrets itself, both for access to basilisk venom and for the ancient magical foundations that would amplify the ritual's power. There's a certain poetic justice to it, Hermione observed as they made final preparations. Using the place where you faced a piece of Voldemort's soul to destroy another. The night of the ritual arrived cold and clear. Harry led their group, Fleur, Hermione, Ron, Luna, Neville, and Professor Flitwick, down to Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Sirius would meet them in the chamber, having snuck into the castle in his animagus form. Remember, Harry cautioned as they prepared to enter, the chamber itself might react to multiple visitors. Stay close and don't touch anything without checking first. He faced the sink with its tiny snake engraving and spoke in Parseltongue, open. The entrance revealed itself, and one by one they slid down the long pipe into the darkness below. Flitwick cast cushioning charms at the bottom, allowing them to land safely in the tunnel of bones. Charming place, Ron muttered, lighting his wand. Forgot how creepy it is down here. They made their way through the tunnel, past the cave-in, which Flitwick expertly stabilized, and finally to the great serpent-entwined door that led to the chamber proper. Harry opened it with another Parseltongue command, revealing the vast chamber beyond. The basilisk skeleton still lay where it had fallen years before, massive and eerily preserved in the chamber's unique atmosphere. Sirius was already there, having transformed back to human form. Merlin's beard, he breathed, staring at the basilisk remains. You killed that thing when you were 12. With help, Harry reminded him, moving toward the center of the chamber where they had prepared the ritual space. A circle had been inscribed on the floor with a mixture of crushed moonstone and phoenix ash. Within it, runes representing purification, separation, and containment formed a complex pattern. At 5 points around the circle, smaller circles waited for the ritual participants. Everyone take your positions, Flitwick instructed, having agreed to oversee the ritual despite the risk to his career. Remember your parts and maintain focus regardless of what you see or hear. Harry took his place in the center circle, while Fleur, Hermione, Luna, Flitwick, and Sirius positioned themselves at the 5 outer points. Ron and Neville stood guard at the chamber entrance, ready to warn of any intrusion. Begin, Flitwick commanded softly. Luna started the ritual with a haunting melody, a phoenix song she claimed to have learned from Fawkes himself. The notes echoed in the vast chamber, seeming to awaken something in the ancient stone. Hermione followed with precisely spoken incantations in ancient Egyptian, activating the separation runes. The circle began to glow with soft blue light. Sirius added his part, black family magic focusing on purging foreign influences, dark but not evil when used for healing purposes. Flitwick's contribution came next, goblin warding spells to contain whatever emerged from Harry's scar, preventing it from escaping or seeking another host. Finally, Fleur stepped forward, palms extended toward Harry. With a look of intense concentration, she summoned her Veela heritage. Blue-white flames danced across her skin, her features sharpening slightly as her Veela nature emerged. "Are you ready?" she asked Harry, her voice carrying an otherworldly resonance. Harry nodded, bracing himself. "Do it." Fleur's fire streamed from her hands, encircling Harry in a column of blue-white flame. Unlike the accidental contact during the first task, this was controlled, focused, directed specifically at the Horcrux in his scar. The pain was immediate and intense. Harry gritted his teeth, fighting to remain conscious as the fire sought out the foreign soul fragment. He could feel it writhing inside him, fighting to remain anchored to his soul. "Now!" Flitwick called. Hermione uncorked the vial of phoenix tears, passing it to Luna, who added 3 drops to the ritual circle. Simultaneously, Sirius used a specially prepared silver dagger to extract venom from one of the basilisk's fangs, carefully adding a single drop to the phoenix tears. The two substances met with a hiss and a flash of golden light. The combined essence flowed through the runic channels, reaching Harry's position in a wave of power. Harry felt something tear inside him, not physical but metaphysical, as if a parasitic growth was being forcibly extracted. His scar burned white-hot, vision blurring with pain. Through the haze, he saw a dark, oily substance begin to seep from his scar, black and malevolent, radiating cold hatred. It fought against the ritual's pull, tendrils trying to reattach to Harry's soul. "Fight it, Harry!" Sirius called. "Push it out." Harry focused every ounce of his will on rejection. This thing was not him, had never been him, would never be part of him again. Drawing on the fragment's collective strength, he mentally severed the last connections between himself and the Horcrux. With a sound like tearing fabric and a high, distant scream, the black substance ripped free of Harry's scar. It hovered in the air for a moment, forming a distorted face that might have been Voldemort's, twisted in rage and pain. Flitwick's containment wards activated fully, creating a shimmering sphere around the Horcrux. Within this boundary, Luna directed the phoenix tears and basilisk venom to engulf the soul fragment. The Horcrux fought viciously, the black substance slamming against the containment wards. But the combination of phoenix tears, the ultimate healing agent, and basilisk venom, one of the few substances that could destroy Horcruxes, proved too powerful. The soul fragment began to dissolve, its silent screams vibrating through the chamber as it disintegrated particle by particle. With a final, violent surge of energy that knocked several participants off their feet, the Horcrux was destroyed. The containment sphere collapsed inward, then vanished with a flash of white light. Harry fell to his knees, overwhelmed by sensation. His scar gave one final throb of pain, then, nothing. For the first time since he could remember, there was no background pressure, no subtle wrongness lurking behind his forehead. "It's gone," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I can feel it, it's actually gone." Sirius rushed to his side, supporting him. "Are you all right?" Harry nodded, unable to fully articulate what he was experiencing. It was like breathing freely after years of constriction, like stepping into sunlight after a lifetime in shadow. The ritual worked perfectly, Flitwick confirmed, casting diagnostic spells. No trace of the foreign entity remains. Fleur approached, her features returned to normal though she looked magically drained. "How do you feel, Harry?" "Lighter," he replied, finding his voice. clearer. Like a fog I didn't even know was there has lifted. He touched his scar, which felt different, no longer a sensitive, slightly inflamed line but a simple, healed mark. The physical scar remains, Flitwick noted, but it is now just that, a scar, nothing more. Hermione was beaming despite her exhaustion. We did it. We actually removed a Horcrux without harming the container. What's a Horcrux? Ron asked from his position at the entrance. A container for a soul fragment, Luna answered dreamily. The darkest magic, splitting the soul through murder. The group fell silent, absorbing the significance of what they'd accomplished, and what it meant for Harry's future. Voldemort had a piece of his soul in me, Harry said, finally speaking the horrifying truth aloud. All these years, I've been carrying a piece of him. And Dumbledore knew, Sirius added grimly. He must have. That's why he never tried to remove it, it was part of his plan somehow. Harry stood shakily, strength returning minute by minute. But now it's gone, and that plan has changed. For the first time, I'm just, me. No Voldemort, no fragments controlled by Dumbledore. Just Harry Potter. Not quite just Harry, Hermione corrected gently. You still have the integrated fragments, all that knowledge and power. But now it's truly yours, not constrained by either Dumbledore or Voldemort. Harry nodded, feeling the truth of her words. The fragments remained, but they felt different now, more completely integrated, more harmoniously his own. Without the Horcrux's dark influence, the fragment's knowledge flowed even more smoothly into his consciousness. We should return to the surface, Flitwick suggested, checking his pocket watch. It's nearly dawn, and questions will be asked if we're all missing at breakfast. They cleared away all evidence of the ritual and made their way back through the chamber and up the pipe, Flitwick charming it to carry them upward rather than having to climb. As they emerged into Myrtle's bathroom, Harry felt a strange magical pulse ripple through the castle, like Hogwarts itself was acknowledging the change in him. Did you feel that? He asked the others. Feel what? Ron questioned, but Fleur and Luna both nodded. The castle recognizes you differently now, Luna said. It sees you without the shadow. They parted ways in the entrance hall, agreeing to meet later to discuss next steps. Harry, Ron, and Hermione headed toward Gryffindor Tower, while Fleur returned to the Beauxbatons carriage and Flitwick to his quarters. Sirius, in dog form, padded alongside them until they reached a secluded corridor near the portrait hole. I'll be in Hogsmeade if you need me, he said after transforming. And Harry, his expression grew serious, be careful around Dumbledore. He'll sense the change in you, and we don't know how he'll react when he realizes his plans have been disrupted. I will, Harry promised. And Sirius? Thank you. For everything. His godfather pulled him into a quick embrace. Your parents would be proud of you, Harry. Not just for what you've accomplished, but for how you've handled having your life manipulated by people who should have protected you. After Sirius departed, Harry, Ron, and Hermione entered the common room, finding it empty at this early hour. We should get some rest, Hermione suggested. The ritual took a lot out of all of us, especially you, Harry. Harry nodded, though he didn't feel particularly tired. If anything, he felt energized, his magic flowing more smoothly than ever before, his mind clear and focused. We'll talk more later, he agreed. And start planning for what comes next. As his friends headed up to their dormitories, Harry lingered in the common room, watching the sunrise through the tower windows. For the first time in his life, he felt truly free, not just from the Horcrux or Dumbledore's bindings, but from the weight of destinies others had chosen for him. Whatever came next, he would face it on his own terms. Harry woke a few hours later, having eventually dozed off in his dormitory. The others were already gone, Saturday breakfast would be well underway. As he dressed, Harry examined himself in the mirror. The physical changes were subtle but unmistakable. His eyes seemed brighter, his movements more graceful. His scar, once an angry red, had faded to a silvery line, still visible, but no longer inflamed. More significant were the internal changes. His magic flowed with unprecedented ease, responding to his intent almost before he consciously directed it. His mind felt sharper, clearer, the fragment's knowledge now perfectly integrated and accessible. Most remarkable was what he didn't feel, the constant background pressure of the Horcrux, a darkness he'd carried for so long he hadn't recognized it until it was gone. Harry made his way to the great hall, aware of the stares and whispers that followed him. News of his disappearance and mysterious, medical treatment had created a buzz of speculation. Now his altered appearance would only fuel those rumors. Hermione and Ron had saved him a seat, both looking tired but pleased. Harry noticed with interest that several students who had participated in the Defense Association were sitting nearby, as if unconsciously drawn to his presence. "How are you feeling?" Hermione asked as he sat down. "Better than I ever have," Harry replied honestly. "Everything's just clearer now." He glanced toward the high table, where Dumbledore was watching him with intense interest. The headmaster's magical aura, now visible to Harry's enhanced perception, showed concern and calculation. "Dumbledore knows something's changed," Harry murmured. "He can sense the Horcrux is gone." "What will he do?" Ron asked, keeping his voice low. "Try to regain control, I expect," Harry replied. "But he'll be careful about it. Too many people are watching now." As if to confirm his assessment, Professor McGonagall approached their table. "Mr. Potter, the headmaster would like to see you in his office after breakfast." Harry nodded politely. "Of course, Professor. I'll be there." Once McGonagall had moved away, Hermione leaned closer. "You shouldn't go alone." "I agree," Ron said. "He might try to redo whatever bindings he had on you before." "He can try," Harry said with quiet confidence. "But I don't think he'll succeed. Not anymore." He studied his friends' concerned faces. "But you're right, having witnesses would be prudent. Why don't you wait outside his office? If I'm not out in 20 minutes, get Professor Flitwick." They agreed to this plan, and Harry finished his breakfast calmly, preparing mentally for the confrontation ahead. When he arrived at the gargoyle guarding Dumbledore's office, Harry could sense intricate layers of magic, wards, alerts, and subtle compulsion charms designed to make visitors more compliant. "Acid pops," he told the gargoyle, which leapt aside. Before ascending, Harry turned to Ron and Hermione. "Remember, 20 minutes, then get Flitwick." The spiral staircase carried him upward, and Harry used those moments to strengthen his mental shields. Drawing on the knowledge of 3 different occlumency specialists among the fragments, he constructed defenses far beyond what a typical 4th year, or even most adult wizards, could manage. "Enter," Dumbledore called before Harry could knock. The office appeared unchanged, silver instruments whirring, Fawkes on his perch, portraits pretending disinterest while watching avidly. Dumbledore sat behind his desk, outwardly serene though Harry could detect tension in his magical aura. "Harry, my boy," the headmaster greeted him warmly. "Please, sit down. How are you feeling this morning?" Harry took the offered seat, neutralizing the compulsion charms on it with a silent counterspell. "Very well, Professor. Better than I have in years, actually." Dumbledore studied him intently, the twinkle in his blue eyes dimmed by concern. "Indeed, you look remarkably well. The magical exhaustion appears to have resolved itself completely." He paused, then added more carefully, "I notice your scar has changed appearance as well." "Yes," Harry agreed simply, offering no explanation. A brief silence stretched between them. Harry could almost see Dumbledore recalculating, reassessing. "Harry," the headmaster finally continued, "I've noticed some concerning activities recently. Students gathering in unusual groups, staff members behaving oddly, and now this remarkable recovery of yours." He leaned forward, expression grave. "I fear that whatever affected you during the first task may have had more significant consequences than we initially realized." "The Veela fire did change things," Harry acknowledged. It revealed truths that had been hidden. Dumbledore's gaze sharpened. What kind of truths, Harry? About my scar, for one, Harry replied calmly. About what was inside it. The headmaster went very still. And what do you believe was inside it? Not what I believe, Professor. What I know. Harry met Dumbledore's eyes without flinching. A Horcrux. A piece of Voldemort's soul, embedded there the night he tried to kill me. If Harry had hoped to shock Dumbledore, he succeeded. The old wizard's composure slipped for a moment, genuine alarm crossing his features. That is a very serious claim, Harry, Dumbledore said carefully. Horcruxes are among the darkest magic, not something students should even know about, let alone discuss casually. It's not there anymore, Harry continued as if Dumbledore hadn't spoken. We removed it last night. Quite successfully, I might add. Now Dumbledore did look genuinely startled. You, removed it? How? With whom? His voice sharpened with urgency. Harry, interfering with such magic without proper understanding could have catastrophic consequences. We had proper understanding, Harry countered. Multiple experts in different magical disciplines, a carefully designed ritual, and the right ingredients, including freely given phoenix tears and basilisk venom from the Chamber of Secrets. Dumbledore rose from his seat, his magical aura fluctuating with concern and what Harry recognized as fear. Harry, I don't think you realize what you've done. The connection between you and Voldemort was never necessary, Harry interrupted firmly. Except for your plans, perhaps. The headmaster stilled, his expression unreadable. My plans? To sacrifice me, Harry said bluntly. That was the endgame, wasn't it? All those soul fragments you placed in me, they were to prepare me to face Voldemort, but not to survive the encounter. Dumbledore sank slowly back into his chair. You know about the fragments. It wasn't a question, but Harry answered anyway. Yes, Professor. Fleur's Veela fire broke your bindings. The fragments are part of me now, integrated, not controlled or suppressed as you intended. For a long moment, Dumbledore said nothing. Harry could see him weighing options, considering approaches, discarding strategies. Harry, he finally said, his voice gentle, you must understand, everything I've done has been for the greater good. The prophecy, I know about the prophecy too, Harry cut in. At least, I can piece it together from the fragment's knowledge. Something about neither can live while the other survives. Dumbledore sighed heavily. Then you understand why certain preparations were necessary. Voldemort will return, indeed, your vision suggests he is already taking steps toward that goal. When he does, only you can ultimately defeat him. I don't dispute that, Harry said evenly. What I dispute is your methods, your secrecy, and your apparent conclusion that my death was an acceptable part of the solution. I never wanted you to die, Harry, Dumbledore protested, though Harry could sense the half-truth in his words. But you believed it would be necessary, Harry pressed. The Horcrux in my scar, you thought it could only be destroyed if I died. Dumbledore didn't deny this. The magic involved is ancient and terrible. All my research suggested, your research was incomplete, Harry interrupted. Or perhaps you only found what you expected to find. A flash of irritation crossed Dumbledore's face. You are speaking of matters beyond your understanding, Harry, despite whatever knowledge these fragments have given you. Magical theory of this complexity is actually quite fascinating, Harry finished for him. Especially when you can draw on the expertise of masters from different eras and disciplines. He leaned forward. That's the irony, Professor. The very tool you created to control me ultimately gave me the knowledge to free myself. Dumbledore's expression hardened slightly. And what do you intend to do with this freedom, Harry? Live, Harry replied simply. Make my own choices. Face Voldemort when the time comes, but on my terms, not as your weapon or sacrifice. And if your terms lead to failure? To deaths that could have been prevented? Dumbledore asked sharply. The greater good sometimes requires personal sacrifice, Harry. Your parents understood that. Harry felt anger flare but controlled it carefully. Don't presume to tell me what my parents would have wanted, Professor. They died to protect me, not to place me in your hands as clay to be molded. The portraits on the walls had abandoned all pretense of disinterest, watching the exchange with rapt attention. Even Fawkes seemed unusually focused, his bright eyes moving between Harry and Dumbledore. What happens now? Dumbledore asked after a long silence, his voice betraying weariness. That depends on you, Harry replied. I have no desire to publicly expose what you've done, at least, not yet. The wizarding world needs unity with Voldemort's return approaching, not division. How pragmatic of you, Dumbledore observed, a hint of his usual twinkle returning. I've had good teachers, Harry countered with a pointed look. Some intentional, some not. And your conditions? Dumbledore inquired, correctly assuming there would be terms. First, you will cease all attempts to control or manipulate me, magically, legally, or otherwise, Harry stated firmly. Second, you will share all information you have about Voldemort, including the locations of any other Horcruxes. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose. You believe there are more? I know there are, Harry confirmed. The fragment in me was too small, too incomplete to be his only precaution against death. Very perceptive, Dumbledore acknowledged. And your other conditions? You will support my legal emancipation, Harry continued. I've already begun the process with assistance from certain parties. And finally, you will gradually remove the subtle compulsions and memory modifications you've placed on students and staff at Hogwarts. Dumbledore frowned. Harry, those minor adjustments are for the smooth operation of the school. Students regularly witness events that would traumatize them without some modification. Then obtain proper consent, Harry countered. From parents, from the Board of Governors, from the students themselves when they're old enough. No more unilateral decisions about what people should remember or feel. The headmaster studied Harry with new eyes, not as a student or a weapon, but as an equal negotiating terms. And if I refuse these conditions, he asked quietly. Then copies of my memories, both mine and those from the fragments showing you performing illegal soul magic on an infant, will be delivered to the DMLE, the Daily Prophet, and several international magical authorities, Harry replied calmly. Dumbledore's eyes widened slightly. You've prepared thoroughly. I had good motivation, Harry said simply. For several moments, Dumbledore said nothing, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he nodded once. Very well, Harry. I accept your terms, with one condition of my own. You will consult me before taking any major actions regarding Voldemort. Not for permission, he added, seeing Harry's expression, but for coordination. Fighting him will require alliance, not individual heroics. Harry considered this. Agreed, provided the consultation goes both ways. No more unilateral decisions from either of us. Then we have an accord, Dumbledore said, extending his hand across the desk. Harry sensed no deception in the gesture, though he remained wary. He accepted the handshake, feeling a subtle flare of magic, not a binding oath, but a mutual acknowledgement of their agreement. I must say, Harry, Dumbledore remarked as they separated, you have grown remarkably in a very short time. These fragments have changed you significantly. Not as much as you might think, Harry replied. They've given me knowledge and certain skills, yes. But my core values, my belief in choice, in transparency, in protecting others, those were always mine. Dumbledore smiled faintly. Perhaps that is why the fragments integrated so successfully. You have a remarkable capacity for absorption without being overwhelmed. His expression grew more serious. There is much I should tell you about Voldemort and his Horcruxes. When would you like to begin? After the second task, Harry decided. I need to focus on that first. But I'll expect full disclosure afterwards, no more carefully edited versions of the truth. As you wish, Dumbledore agreed, though Harry detected a hint of reservation. Old habits, it seemed, died hard. As Harry rose to leave, Dumbledore asked one final question, "Harry, among these fragments, whose souls did I use?" Harry paused at the door. "Remarkable people," he answered. "Scholars, healers, warriors, inventors, people whose knowledge and gifts you harvested for your grand design." He studied the old wizard's face. "Did you ever ask their permission, Professor? Before taking pieces of their essence as they died?" Dumbledore's silence was answer enough. "That's what bothers me most," Harry continued quietly. "Not what you did to me, but what you did to them. They deserved better than to become components in someone else's plan, however noble you believed that plan to be." With that, he left the office, finding Hermione and Ron waiting anxiously outside. "What happened?" Hermione demanded as they walked away from the gargoyle. "We were about to get Flitwick." Harry gave them a brief summary of the conversation as they made their way to an empty classroom for privacy. "And you trust him to keep his word?" Ron asked skeptically. "Trust is too strong a term," Harry replied. "Let's say I'm giving him the opportunity to prove he can adapt to our new arrangement. But I'm not relying on his word alone, we'll continue building our network and gathering evidence." "What about the second task?" Hermione asked. "It's less than 2 weeks away." Harry grinned. "Actually, I've solved the egg already. One of the fragments was fluent in Mermish, recognized it immediately when I opened the egg underwater." "So what's the task?" Ron pressed eagerly. "Retrieving something valuable from the Mere people in the Black Lake," Harry explained. "We'll have 1 hour to search." Hermione's eyes widened. "Underwater? For an hour? How will you breathe?" "I've been considering several options," Harry replied. "Bubblehead charm is the obvious choice, but I'm also looking at partial transfiguration techniques that would be more efficient for swimming." Ron shook his head in amazement. "It's still weird hearing you talk like that, all knowledgeable and strategic." "Get used to it," Harry advised with a smile. "Because this is who I am now. Not just the fragments, but me, Harry, making choices about how to use what they've given me." "And what about Voldemort?" Hermione asked more soberly. "If he's planning to return using the tournament somehow." "We'll be ready," Harry said with quiet confidence. "With the Horcrux gone, I can think more clearly about how to counter whatever he's planning." He touched his scar thoughtfully. "And there's an unexpected benefit, without the connection, he can't send me visions or access my thoughts anymore." This had been a significant concern, that Voldemort might exploit their mental connection to plant false visions or spy on their plans. Now that danger was eliminated. Over the next days, Harry divided his time between preparing for the second task, continuing to lead the Defense Association, and working with his inner circle to solidify their position. Fleur proved an invaluable ally, not just for her knowledge of Veela magic but for her political acumen and connections through Madame Maxime. She had also developed a genuine friendship with Harry, their shared experience with the Veela fire creating a unique bond. In Veela culture, she explained during one of their training sessions, such a connection would be considered significant. "Fire-touched, we would call you, someone whose magic has been purified and transformed by Veela flame. Is that rare?" Harry asked, curious about this aspect of her heritage that few wizards ever learned. "Extremely," Fleur confirmed. "Veela fire rarely touches wizards except in combat or intimate situations." A faint blush colored her cheeks. "Neither circumstance typically leads to the kind of magical integration you experienced. You are quite possibly unique in recorded history." This uniqueness extended to Harry's magical abilities. With the Horcrux removed and the fragments fully integrated, his power had stabilized at a level far beyond his previous capacity. Spells that had once required concentration now came effortlessly. His magical stamina had increased exponentially, allowing him to cast continuously without fatigue. Most impressive was his intuitive understanding of magical theory. Drawing on the combined knowledge of specialists from different eras and traditions, Harry could analyze spells and magical phenomena with unprecedented insight. "It's like having a panel of experts in my head," he explained to Hermione when she marveled at his ability to deconstruct complex charms. "They don't tell me what to think, but they provide perspectives I would never have considered on my own." These abilities would prove crucial for the second task. After considering various approaches, Harry settled on a hybrid solution, a partial transfiguration of his lower body into a more hydrodynamic form, combined with a modified bubblehead charm that would filter water through artificial gills rather than simply providing an air bubble. "It's more complex than standard approaches," he admitted during a planning session with his friends, "but it will be far more efficient for swimming and maneuvering underwater." Fleur nodded approvingly. "I was considering something similar, though without the transfiguration component. My Veela heritage gives me some advantage with air-based magic, but underwater is more challenging." As the day of the second task approached, Harry felt a strange mix of confidence and caution. The task itself seemed manageable with his enhanced abilities, but he remained wary of whatever larger plot Voldemort and his agent at Hogwarts were orchestrating. The night before the task, Harry was summoned to Dumbledore's office. He went cautiously, bringing Hermione with him as a precaution. "I merely wish to share some information that might be relevant to tomorrow's task," Dumbledore explained when they arrived. "No need for concern." The headmaster seemed to be making an effort to honor their agreement, offering details about the Merpeople colony in the Black Lake and the magical properties of the water itself. "The lake is deeper than most realize," Dumbledore noted, "with magical currents that can disorient swimmers. The Merpeople themselves are territorial but bound by magical treaty to assist with the tournament. They will not harm champions directly, though they may impede progress." "Thank you for the information," Harry said, genuinely appreciative. "Is there anything else I should know?" Dumbledore hesitated. "Only that what you seek to retrieve tomorrow may be more personal than you anticipate. The judges have selected items, or rather, people, of significance to each champion." Hermione gasped softly. "People? You're putting people underwater for an hour?" "With every magical protection, Miss Granger," Dumbledore assured her. "They will be in an enchanted sleep, unable to drown or feel discomfort." Harry frowned. "That seems unnecessarily dramatic, and risky. What if a champion fails?" "The hostages will be returned safely regardless," Dumbledore explained. "Though of course the champions are not being told this detail." Harry considered the implications. "Who will be my hostage?" "That I cannot reveal," Dumbledore said. "The selection was made based on observed personal connections." After they left the office, Hermione expressed outrage at the task design. "Using people as prizes? It's barbaric. And manipulative, they're deliberately playing on emotional attachments to pressure champions into taking risks." "Classic misdirection too," Harry observed. "Making us worry about saving someone rather than focusing on the magical challenge itself." He considered who might be chosen for him. Ron seemed the obvious choice, though Hermione herself was equally likely. The morning of the second task dawned cold and gray, the February chill penetrating even through warming charms. Harry arrived at the lake earlier than required, wanting time to prepare and observe the setup. Fleur joined him shortly after, looking focused and determined. "Have you seen Gabrielle?" she asked worriedly. "My sister, she was not at breakfast, and no one seems to know where she is." Harry felt a sinking sensation. "Fleur, I think I know where she might be." He quickly explained what Dumbledore had told him about hostages. Fleur's expression transformed from worry to anger. "They took my sister. Without permission. She is only 8 years old." "They've supposedly taken protective measures," Harry assured her, though he shared her outrage. "But it does raise the stakes considerably." By the time the other champions arrived, Harry had completed his mental preparations and rehearsed the complex spell sequence he would need. He noticed that Victor Crumb seemed agitated, repeatedly scanning the crowd as if looking for someone. Cedric too appeared more nervous than usual. Missing someone? Harry asked Cedric quietly. The Hufflepuff's expression confirmed Harry's suspicion. Cho, she said she'd wish me luck before the task, but no one's seen her since last night. As Ludo Bagman gathered the champions for instructions, Harry took the opportunity to share what he knew with both Cedric and Crumb. Hostages? Crumb repeated, his accent thicker than usual. They took Hermione. Most likely, Harry confirmed. Along with Cho for Cedric and Gabrielle for Fleur. And for you? Cedric asked. Probably Ron, Harry guessed, having noticed his friend's absence that morning. This information changed the dynamic between the champions. What had been a competition suddenly felt more like a shared rescue mission. We should cooperate, Crumb suggested unexpectedly. Not against rules to help each other reach hostages. Harry nodded, impressed by Crumb's attitude. Agreed. Let's all get there safely rather than racing at the expense of anyone's well-being. Fleur and Cedric concurred, and the four champions faced the lake with newfound solidarity. When Bagman's whistle finally sounded, Harry didn't hesitate. With precise wand movements, he cast the modified bubblehead charm, feeling the strange sensation of water filtering through newly formed magical gills at his neck. Simultaneously, he performed the partial transfiguration, his legs merging and reshaping into a powerful, fish-like tail. The transformation was disorienting but effective. Harry slid into the water with unprecedented grace, his new form cutting through the lake with remarkable speed and efficiency. Nearby, he saw Fleur using a standard bubblehead charm, Cedric doing the same, and Crumb attempting a shark head transfiguration that seemed only partially successful. Harry gestured to them, pointing toward the center of the lake where he sensed the Mere People village would be located. Fleur and Cedric followed his lead, while Crumb struggled briefly with his transfiguration before joining them. Together, they descended into the murky depths. Harry used a subtle illumination charm to light their way, revealing the eerie underwater landscape. Forests of swaying weeds concealed all manner of creatures, grindylows lurking in the shadows, curious plimpies darting between rocks, and once, the enormous tentacle of the giant squid undulating lazily in the distance. The water grew colder and darker as they descended, pressure increasing though Harry's spells compensated automatically. He sensed they were nearing the Mere People territory when a haunting melody began to penetrate the water around them, the same murmish singing he'd heard from the Golden Egg, but infinitely more complex and beautiful in its natural setting. Harry gestured to the others to stay close as they navigated through a final forest of tall seaweed. Emerging on the other side, they found themselves facing the Mere People village, a collection of crude stone dwellings decorated with shimmering shells and bones, inhabited by the eerie gray-skinned, yellow-eyed Mere People. In the center of the village square, 4 figures floated, tethered to a massive statue of a merperson. Just as Harry had predicted, Ron, Hermione, Cho, and a small blonde girl who could only be Fleur's sister. The Mere People watched with spear-carrying guards as the 4 champions approached. Harry gestured to the others to each take their own hostage, while he swam forward to examine the bindings. The hostages appeared to be in an enchanted sleep as Dumbledore had claimed, peaceful expressions on their faces despite the eerie underwater setting. The ropes binding them were magical in nature, designed to release when touched by the correct champion. Harry easily freed Ron, while Cedric and Crumb released Cho and Hermione respectively. Fleur, however, encountered resistance when she tried to free Gabrielle, the rope seemed to be refusing her touch. Remembering Dumbledore's warning about the Merpeople's territorial nature, Harry realized they might be enforcing the "one hostage per champion" rule literally. He gestured to Fleur, indicating he would help, then approached the Mereguards cautiously. Drawing on a Fragment's knowledge of Mermish customs, Harry made a formal gesture of respect before pointing to Gabrielle and then to Fleur. The lead guard shook his head, gesturing with his spear toward the surface as if to say, "One only." Harry considered his options. He could try to overpower the guards magically, but that would violate the tournament rules and potentially breach the treaty with the Mere People. Instead, he tried a different approach. Accessing the Fragment's knowledge of underwater acoustic magic, Harry created a harmonic resonance that approximated formal Mermish speech. The sound was crude by mere people standards but recognizable, a request for exception based on blood kinship between Fleur and Gabrielle. The mare guards appeared startled that a human could produce even an approximation of their language. After conferring briefly, the lead guard nodded and gestured for Fleur to proceed. This time, the rope released at her touch. Gabrielle remained in her enchanted sleep as Fleur gathered her in her arms, gratitude evident in her eyes as she looked at Harry. With all 4 hostages freed, they began their ascent. Harry's transfigured form allowed him to help propel Ron upward while still maintaining good speed. Crumb assisted similarly with Hermione, his partial shark transformation providing strong swimming capability despite its awkward appearance. They were nearing the surface when Harry sensed a disturbance in the water, a magical current that hadn't been present during their descent. Something was interfering with the task. A swarm of Grindylows emerged from the weeds, far more aggressive than these creatures typically behaved. They targeted Fleur specifically, dozens of the horned water demons grabbing at her arms and legs, trying to separate her from Gabrielle. Harry reacted instantly. Drawing on battle magic from 3 different fragments, he created a spherical shield around Fleur and Gabrielle while simultaneously casting a sonic pulse that disoriented the Grindylows. Cedric and Crumb joined the defense, creating a protective formation around Fleur as they continued upward. This isn't natural behavior, Harry communicated to the others through a series of hand signals. Something's controlling them. As if confirming his suspicion, a dark magical signature pulsed through the water, a compulsion spell directed specifically at the lake's creatures. Harry traced its origin to the shore, though the caster remained unidentifiable at this distance. They broke the surface to thunderous applause from the crowd, who seemed delighted by the champion's unified approach. Fleur was first to speak once her bubblehead charm dissolved. "Thank you," she said breathlessly to Harry as Gabrielle awakened in her arms. They were not just Grindylows, there was magic directing them. "I felt it too," Harry agreed, canceling his transfiguration and returning his legs to normal. Someone interfered with the task. The hostages were now fully awake, being wrapped in thick towels by Madame Pomfrey. Ron sputtered indignantly about being underwater bait, while Hermione was already analyzing the magical implications of the enchanted sleep. Dumbledore and the other judges approached, apparently pleased with the outcome, though Karkaroff looked disappointed that the task hadn't produced a clear winner. "Most impressive," Dumbledore remarked. "All 4 champions returning together, all hostages safe. A demonstration of international magical cooperation at its finest." Harry caught his eye meaningfully. "There was outside interference, Professor. Someone cast a compulsion charm on the Grindylows, targeting Fleur specifically." Dumbledore's expression sharpened. "Are you certain?" "Absolutely," Harry confirmed. "The magical signature was distinct, not natural aggression." "I felt it too," Cedric added. Something was controlling those creatures. Dumbledore exchanged glances with Moody, who had been watching the lake's surface with his magical eye. "Alastair, perhaps you could investigate the shoreline. If someone cast interference spells." Moody nodded gruffly and stumped away, his magical eye swiveling in all directions. The judges conferred briefly about scoring, eventually awarding all 4 champions equal points for their cooperative approach and successful rescue. This left Harry and Cedric tied for first place overall, with Fleur and Crumb close behind. As the crowd dispersed and the champions were led away for medical checks, Harry felt a strange magical pulse, similar to the one he'd sensed underwater, but fainter. He turned toward the forbidden forest just in time to see a shimmer of movement at its edge. Drawing on the fragment's enhanced perception, Harry briefly glimpsed a figure watching the proceedings, a tall, lean wizard in dark robes. Their eyes met for a split second before the figure disapparated with a crack that only Harry seemed to hear. "What is it?" Hermione asked, noticing his sudden focus. "I'm not sure," Harry replied truthfully. "But I think we just got a glimpse of Voldemort's agent at Hogwarts, and it wasn't Moody." This new development complicated matters significantly. If Moody wasn't the infiltrator as they'd suspected, then who was? And what was their ultimate plan for the tournament? As they returned to the castle, Harry considered how quickly things were evolving. The second task was complete, the Horcrux was gone, and his agreement with Dumbledore was holding, for now. But Voldemort's plans continued to advance, and Harry knew the final confrontation was approaching faster than anyone realized. The fragments within him stirred with anticipation, their collective knowledge preparing him for whatever came next. For the first time, Harry felt truly ready to face not just Voldemort but his own destiny, not as Dumbledore's weapon, but as his own person, making his own choices. The path ahead would be dangerous, but Harry Potter was no longer walking it blind. Chapter 3, Phoenix Rising. Spring arrived at Hogwarts in a rush of green, the grounds transforming almost overnight from the barren chill of late winter to vibrant life. Harry found himself watching this renewal from the astronomy tower one evening in late March, struck by how it mirrored his own transformation. Like the dormant plants now bursting forth with new vigor, he had emerged from Dumbledore's constraints into something stronger, more authentic. Contemplating the metaphysical implications of seasonal change, Potter, came a familiar French accent from behind him. Harry turned to see Fleur approaching, silvery hair gleaming in the twilight. Since the second task, their connection had deepened beyond mere alliance. Working together to escape the magically influenced Grindylows had cemented a bond of trust that continued to grow. Something like that, he admitted with a smile. That, and planning our next move. Fleur joined him at the parapet, her presence a comfortable warmth beside him. You've identified the imposter, then? Almost certainly, Harry replied. The magical signature I sensed during the second task, I've detected it twice more. Once near Moody's office, and again during a staff meeting I was passing. And? Fleur prompted when he hesitated. Harry's expression hardened. It's Barty Crouch. The tournament official. But he's barely been at Hogwarts since the first task. Not senior, junior, Harry clarified. Barty Crouch Jr., supposedly dead in Azkaban years ago. One of the fragments recognized his magical signature, a witch who sat on his original trial. Fleur's eyes widened. But then who is currently impersonating Moody? Also Crouch Jr., Harry explained. He's using Polyjuice Potion. The real Moody is likely being held captive somewhere nearby. Crouch would need regular access to him for hair samples. We must tell Dumbledore, Fleur insisted. Whatever our disagreements with him, this is a direct threat to the school. Harry nodded. I've already sent him a message. We're meeting tonight with Sirius and Professor Flitwick. He turned to face her fully. I'd like you there too. Your perspective on magical detection could be valuable. Veela can sense deception differently than wizards. Fleur agreed readily. As they made their way down from the tower, Harry filled her in on his other discoveries over the past month. Since the second task, he had been methodically investigating two parallel tracks, Voldemort's plans for resurrection, and the full extent of Dumbledore's past manipulations. The fragment's knowledge had proven invaluable for both. The resurrection ritual requires 3 key components, Harry explained quietly as they walked through deserted corridors. Bone of the father, flesh of the servant, and blood of the enemy, specifically, my blood. That's what the third task is about. Not just finishing the tournament, but delivering me to Voldemort. How will they manage that? The task takes place at Hogwarts, with hundreds of witnesses. A portkey, most likely, Harry theorized. Something within the maze that will transport me directly to Voldemort when touched. The Triwizard Cup itself would be perfect, the natural endpoint of the task, something I'd reach for without hesitation. Fleur considered this. If we know their plan, we can counter it. Alert the staff, secure the cup. Or let it play out on our terms, Harry suggested. Spring the trap, but be prepared. Fleur stopped walking, turning to him with alarm. That is too dangerous. Even with your new abilities, I don't intend to face him alone, Harry assured her. But this may be our best opportunity to deal with Voldemort while he's still vulnerable. Once he returns to full power. He didn't need to finish the thought. They both understood the stakes. They arrived at Dumbledore's office to find the headmaster already in conversation with Sirius and Professor Flitwick. The atmosphere was tense but focused. "Ah, Harry, Miss Delacour," Dumbledore greeted them. "We were just discussing your theory about Alastor, or rather, who is currently presenting as Alastor." "It's not just a theory anymore," Harry replied, placing a small vial of silvery liquid on Dumbledore's desk. "I've been monitoring the impostor's movements. This is a memory of him returning to Moody's quarters and taking the polyjuice. You can clearly see the transformation." Dumbledore examined the vial with raised eyebrows. "Most impressive detective work, Harry. May I ask how you obtained this memory without being detected?" "A combination of disillusionment charms and magical perception techniques," Harry explained. "I can sense magical signatures through walls now. It made tracking him much easier." Sirius looked both proud and concerned. "That's beyond Newt-level magical sensitivity." "Indeed," Flitwick agreed. "Most professional cursebreakers would envy such ability." Dumbledore nodded thoughtfully. "So we are dealing with Barty Crouch Jr., who is impersonating Alastor Moody while serving Voldemort." He steepled his fingers. "The question becomes, how do we proceed? If we apprehend him immediately, we alert Voldemort that his plan has been discovered. But if we wait," Flitwick countered, "we allow a Death Eater continued access to the school and students. Not to mention," Sirius added darkly, "the real Moody is presumably being held captive somewhere, likely in poor condition." Harry had been considering this problem for days. "I believe the real Moody is being kept in his own quarters, specifically, in the magical trunk in his bedroom. I've detected a second human magical signature from that location, though it's faint and fluctuates, suggesting the person is either weakened or under magical suppression." Dumbledore looked genuinely impressed. "Your perceptive abilities have developed remarkably, Harry." He turned to the others. "I propose a measured approach. We rescue Alastor tonight, replacing him with a transfigured decoy to prevent Crouch from realizing his captive is missing. Meanwhile, we monitor Crouch closely but allow him to believe his disguise remains intact." "Why not simply arrest him?" Fleur asked. "With the real Moody as evidence, even your ministry could not ignore such proof." "Because we need to know Voldemort's full plan," Harry explained before Dumbledore could answer. "Crouch is our best link to that information. If we move against him too soon, Voldemort will simply find another way, one we might not anticipate." Sirius nodded reluctantly. "As much as I hate leaving that monster in place, Harry's right. Better the enemy we know." They spent the next hour planning the rescue operation and subsequent surveillance. Fleur would assist with detection spells to penetrate any magical concealments on the trunk. Flitwick would handle the creation of a convincing decoy. Sirius, despite the risk of being seen, insisted on participating in the actual rescue. His animagus form would provide both cover and muscle if needed. "And what of the third task itself?" Flitwick asked as they concluded. "If the cup is indeed to be transformed into a portkey, we let the plan proceed," Dumbledore said firmly, "but with our own modifications." He turned to Harry. "I propose placing a secondary tracking charm on the cup, one that will activate when the portkey is used, allowing us to follow immediately." Harry considered this, then nodded. "That could work, but with one condition: I want control of who follows. This can't be an Auror operation or a Ministry ambush. Fudge would bungle it, and we'd lose our chance." "Whom did you have in mind?" Dumbledore inquired, though his expression suggested he already knew. "A small strike team," Harry replied. "Sirius, Fleur, Professor Flitwick if he's willing, possibly Bill Weasley for his curse-breaking expertise. People I trust completely, with complementary magical skills." Dumbledore studied him for a long moment. "You've given this considerable thought." "I've had little choice," Harry responded evenly. Since discovering I was being prepared as both weapon and sacrifice, I've had to consider alternatives. A flicker of something, regret, perhaps, crossed Dumbledore's features. Very well. I will support your plan, with the addition of myself to this strike team. Voldemort is not an enemy to be underestimated, even for someone with your enhanced capabilities. Harry accepted this compromise, recognizing both the strategic value of Dumbledore's power and the political reality that the headmaster would never allow such an operation to proceed without his involvement. They parted with assignments clearly delineated. The rescue operation would commence at midnight when the castle was at its quietest. Until then, they would prepare individually. As Harry and Fleur left Dumbledore's office, Sirius pulled his godson aside briefly. "I know that look," he said quietly. "James had it whenever he was holding something back. What aren't you telling Dumbledore?" Harry glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. "I've been researching the resurrection ritual Voldemort plans to use. There's a vulnerability in it that none of them have considered, something I might be able to exploit if I do end up in that graveyard." Sirius's expression grew concerned. "What kind of vulnerability?" "The ritual requires blood of the enemy, forcibly taken," Harry explained. "But what if the blood isn't taken forcibly? What if it's given willingly, but under specific magical conditions of my choosing?" Understanding dawned in Sirius's eyes. "You could corrupt the ritual." "Exactly. I'm not walking into a trap, Sirius, I'm setting one of my own." Sirius squeezed his shoulder. "Be careful, Harry. Magical rituals are notoriously unpredictable when modified." "I know. That's why I haven't shared this with Dumbledore yet. He'd try to prevent it based on theoretical risks rather than potential rewards." After Sirius departed to prepare for the rescue operation, Fleur fell into step beside Harry. "Your godfather is right to be concerned. Blood rituals are ancient and dangerous magic." Harry wasn't surprised she had overheard. "Which is exactly why I need to understand them perfectly. Would you help me with something?" "Of course. The Room of Requirement has provided books on ritual magic, but there are aspects of blood-based spells that aren't covered, specifically, the interaction between freely given blood and certain magical intents." Fleur's eyes lit with understanding. "Ah, you speak of blood willingly given but conditionally bound. This is actually something Veela understand well. Our traditions include blood oath magic that predates most wizarding practices." They spent the next few hours in the Room of Requirement, Fleur sharing knowledge of Veela blood rituals that complemented and enhanced what Harry had gleaned from the fragments. Together, they crafted a modification to the standard protection spell, one that would allow Harry to donate his blood in a way that appeared forced but was actually given under very specific magical conditions. "It is elegant," Fleur acknowledged when they had finished refining the approach. "If performed correctly, it creates a recursive binding that turns the ritual's purpose back upon itself. And unlike most protection magics," Harry added, "it doesn't require sacrifice, just precision and clear intent." Fleur studied him with a mixture of admiration and concern. "You have changed so much, Harry Potter. Sometimes I hardly recognize the boy I first met before the first task." "Is that a bad thing?" he asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. She considered her answer carefully. "No, not bad. But significant. You carry the knowledge of many powerful witches and wizards, yet you remain, essentially yourself. It is a remarkable balance." Harry appreciated her candor. "The fragments have given me knowledge and certain skills, but not their personalities or motivations. Those remain my own." "And what are your motivations, Harry? Beyond surviving Voldemort, beyond exposing Dumbledore's manipulations, what do you want for yourself?" The question caught him off guard. He'd been so focused on immediate threats and necessary responses that he'd given little thought to his own desires beyond them. "Freedom, I suppose," he said finally. "The chance to make choices based on what I want, not what others have planned for me. To use these abilities I've gained in ways I decide are right." He looked at her curiously. "What about you? After the tournament ends, what then? A small smile curved her lips. I had planned to apply for a position at Gringotts in their curse-breaking division. Bill Weasley has been most encouraging about the prospects. Her expression grew more serious. But now, I find myself reconsidering. The magical world seems to be approaching a turning point. Perhaps there are more important contributions to be made. We could certainly use your expertise, Harry said, then added more hesitantly, and I valued your friendship more than you know. Something warm flickered in Fleur's eyes. As I have valued yours, Harry. They might have said more, but it was approaching midnight, time for the rescue operation to begin. The extraction of the real Mad-Eye Moody went more smoothly than expected. Crouch Jr. had indeed been keeping him prisoner in the magical trunk, heavily sedated and periodically harvested for hair. The veteran Auror was weak but alive, and Flitwick's transfigured decoy was convincing enough to fool periodic checks. Will he recover? Harry asked Madame Pomfrey, who had been sworn to secrecy and brought to a secure location to treat Moody. Given time and proper care, yes, she replied, efficiently administering potions. Though I dare say his paranoia will be worse than ever after this experience. The real Moody, despite his weakened state, insisted on being briefed about the situation. His magical eye swiveled to Harry with disconcerting intensity. Potter, he growled. Albus says you're the one who figured out the imposter. Good work. His scarred face twisted into what might have been a smile. Now tell me everything you know about this plot. Harry provided a concise summary, noting how Moody's expression grew increasingly grim. A cemetery ritual, the old Auror muttered. Classic dark magic setting. Ancestral connections amplify power. He fixed his normal eye on Dumbledore while his magical eye continued to study Harry. And you're planning to let Potter spring the trap deliberately? Risky. Calculated risk, Harry corrected. With proper preparation and backup. Moody's magical eye seemed to look through Harry in a way that was distinctly uncomfortable. You're different from what I remember, Potter. Your magical signature, it's changed. A side effect of the tournament, Dumbledore interjected smoothly before Harry could respond. We're monitoring it closely. Moody looked skeptical but didn't press the issue. Instead, he began offering tactical suggestions for the cemetery operation, drawing on decades of experience hunting dark wizards. Over the next weeks leading to the third task, Harry divided his time between preparation and maintaining appearances. To anyone watching, he was simply a Triwizard champion focused on the final challenge, occasionally seen practicing advanced spells with friends. In reality, he was coordinating a complex counter-operation while continuing to investigate both Voldemort's plans and Dumbledore's past actions. The fragments proved invaluable for the latter. Several had known Dumbledore personally during different periods of his long life, providing perspectives that filled gaps in the historical record. What emerged was a portrait of a brilliant but increasingly isolated wizard whose early traumas had calcified into a troubling willingness to manipulate others for what he deemed the greater good. It's not that he's evil, Harry explained to Hermione, Ron, and Neville during one of their private strategy sessions. But somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing people as individuals with their own agency. We became pieces on a chessboard, sacrificed when necessary for the larger game. That doesn't excuse what he did to you, Ron said firmly. Or to any of us. No, Harry agreed. It doesn't. But understanding his mindset helps us predict his actions, and potential betrayals. Despite their agreement, Harry remained wary of Dumbledore's ultimate intentions. The headmaster had been cooperative since their confrontation, sharing information about the remaining Horcruxes and supporting their preparations for the third task. But occasionally, Harry would catch a calculating look in those blue eyes, a momentary assessment of Harry's growing power and independence that suggested Dumbledore was recalibrating his own plans. Sirius shared these concerns. Albus plays the long game, he warned during one of their secure communications. He's allowing you this autonomy now because it serves his immediate needs, but don't think he's abandoned his wider strategies. I know, Harry acknowledged. That's why we're moving forward with the legal proceedings. The legal proceedings were a carefully constructed case challenging Dumbledore's guardianship of Harry, based on documented neglect and magical manipulation. With Sirius's connections and evidence from the goblins about financial irregularities, they had built a compelling case that would be difficult to dismiss, even with Dumbledore's considerable influence. The paperwork will be filed the day after the third task, Sirius confirmed. Either way, win or lose against Voldemort, you'll be legally emancipated from Dumbledore's control. This contingency planning extended to every aspect of their approach to the third task. Harry worked with Bill Weasley to design counterport-key measures that would allow his team to follow him to the graveyard within seconds. Fleur and Flitwick developed specialized shield charms adapted for dark ritual environments. Hermione researched the Little Hangleton graveyard where the ritual would likely take place, creating detailed maps and identifying tactical positions. Meanwhile, the Defense Association had evolved into something closer to a resistance movement. Students from all houses, even a few Slytherins, now participated in training that went well beyond standard curriculum. Harry taught not just defensive spells but awareness of mental manipulation, recognition of compulsion charms, and techniques for breaking magical constraints. "You're building an army," Luna observed serenely during one session. Harry looked up from helping a third year with a shield charm. "Not an army. A community of people who can think and decide for themselves." Luna smiled. "Same thing, really. The most powerful army is one that fights because they choose to, not because they're ordered to." As May turned to June, the Hogwarts grounds were transformed once more, this time by the massive hedges of the third task maze, growing daily under Professor Sprout's care. Harry observed their progress with grim determination, knowing that somewhere within that labyrinth, the Triwizard Cup would be waiting, his planned transportation to Voldemort. 1 week before the task, Harry convened his core team for final preparations. They met in the Chamber of Secrets, still the most secure location in Hogwarts, accessible only to Harry and now protected by additional wards of their own creation. Present were Sirius, Fleur, Hermione, Ron, Neville, Bill Weasley, Professor Flitwick, and, somewhat surprisingly, Fred and George Weasley, whose inventive talents had proven unexpectedly valuable. "The tracking charm is complete," Bill reported, laying out a parchment with complex runic equations. "It's a modified Egyptoid locator spell combined with a bloodlink tracker. Once activated, it will create a temporary apparition corridor that bypasses standard anti-apparition wards." "Won't Voldemort have his own anti-apparition measures?" Hermione asked. "Almost certainly," Bill confirmed. "But this doesn't use conventional apparition magic. It creates a momentary sympathetic connection between blood-linked individuals, in this case, Harry and Sirius, who completed the ritual last week." Sirius nodded. "The Black Family Grimoire actually had useful applications, for once. The blood bond is temporary but powerful. It will allow me to bring up to 5 others with me directly to Harry's location, regardless of protective enchantments." "Assuming the ritual works as intended," Flitwick cautioned. "Blood magic is notoriously unpredictable." "We've tested it thoroughly," Harry assured him. "The link is stable and specific." Fred and George presented their contribution next, a series of specialized magical devices designed for the unique conditions of a dark ritual interruption. "We call this one the perimeter pulse," Fred explained, holding up what looked like a small silver disc. "Throws out a wave of magic dampening energy in a 10-meter radius. Won't stop major curses, but it'll disrupt minor enchantments and reveal disillusioned opponents." "And this," George added, "is the Chaos Cluster." He displayed several marble-sized spheres of different colors. Each one creates a specific effect when triggered: smoke screens, blinding flashes, localized weather effects, that sort of thing. Perfect for creating tactical advantages in unfamiliar territory. Harry was impressed. These go well beyond standard joke products. The twins exchanged glances. "Well, we've had some inspiration lately," George admitted. "Found a whole new section of our brain seems to have opened up," Fred added. Wonder how that happened. Harry smiled, knowing his freed magic had been steadily breaking down Dumbledore's constraints on the twins' considerable talents. They continued reviewing plans, covering every contingency they could imagine. Fleur presented a specialized shield charm infused with Veela fire properties, capable of disrupting necromantic energies without harming the caster. Neville, whose confidence and magical ability had grown exponentially over the past months, demonstrated advanced herbological countermeasures for potential potion ingredients Voldemort might employ. What about Dumbledore? Ron asked as they were concluding. He still thinks he's leading this operation. And as far as he knows, he is, Harry replied. He'll arrive with us in the graveyard as planned. We'll need his power against Voldemort and whatever Death Eaters might be present. But you don't trust him completely, Hermione observed. Harry shook his head. I trust him to fight Voldemort. I don't trust him not to try controlling the situation, and me, if the opportunity arises. That's why everyone here has specific roles and contingency plans that he doesn't know about. As the meeting concluded, Fleur remained behind with Harry while the others departed in staggered intervals to avoid drawing attention. You did not mention your personal plan, she noted once they were alone. The blood ritual modification. Harry sighed. Because I'm still refining it, and because I'm not entirely sure it will work. It's theoretical, based on combining several magical traditions. Show me your current design, Fleur requested. Harry hesitated, then drew out a parchment covered in intricate diagrams and calculations. Fleur studied it with the expertise of someone well-versed in both theoretical magic and practical applications. This is ambitious, she said finally. You're attempting to invert the entire purpose of the resurrection ritual by introducing conditional intent into the blood component. Exactly, Harry confirmed. When Wormtail takes my blood forcibly, it will actually be given under a specific magical intent that I've prepared in advance. The ritual calls for blood of the enemy, but my blood will carry a different magical signature, one that recognizes Voldemort's original identity as Tom Riddle and establishes a magical relationship of my choosing. This could backfire catastrophically, Fleur warned. Blood rituals are sensitive to intent, yes, but they also follow their own internal logic. The magic might simply reject your modification and proceed as originally designed. That's a risk I have to take, Harry replied. If it works, it changes everything. If it fails, we fall back to the direct confrontation approach. Fleur studied him for a long moment. You are not telling me everything. Harry met her gaze steadily. The modification includes a component based on my mother's sacrifice. If it works as I've designed, it will create a magical debt between Voldemort and me, one that fundamentally alters our connection. Binding him to you instead of you to him, Fleur realized. Reversing the magical dominance. She shook her head in amazement. It is brilliant but incredibly dangerous. The magical backlash alone could kill you both. I've built-in protection against that, Harry assured her. Multiple fail-safes and containment parameters. Fleur didn't look entirely convinced, but she recognized the determination in his eyes. Very well. But allow me to add a Veela stabilization element to the preliminary incantation. It will help maintain the integrity of your intent against external magical pressure. They spent the next hour refining the ritual modification, Fleur's expertise in emotion-based magic complementing Harry's more technical approach. The result was more elegant and robust than his original design, a synthesis of multiple magical traditions that might just accomplish the impossible. As they finally prepared to leave the chamber, Fleur caught his hand. Harry, she said softly, no matter how well we plan, tomorrow will be dangerous. If something happens, it won't, Harry interrupted gently. We've considered every angle. We both know that in magic, as in life, there are always unknowns. Her blue eyes held his with unusual intensity. I just want you to know that working with you, knowing you as you truly are, not the boy who lived, not Dumbledore's weapon, but simply Harry, has been one of the most meaningful experiences of my life. Touched by her sincerity, Harry squeezed her hand. For me too, Fleur. Whatever happens tomorrow, that won't change. The morning of the third task dawned clear and warm. Harry woke early, reviewing his preparations one final time before joining the other champions for breakfast. Cedric looked nervous but determined, Crumb stoic as usual. Fleur maintained a convincing facade of competitive focus, though her eyes met Harry's briefly with deeper understanding. The great hall buzzed with excitement. The conclusion of the Triwizard Tournament was a historic occasion, drawing additional visitors beyond those who had attended previous tasks. Minister Fudge was present, along with various ministry officials and international observers. Harry noted with interest that Rita Skeeter was conspicuously absent, a consequence of Hermione's recent discovery that the reporter was an unregistered animagus, currently contained in a magically reinforced jar in Hermione's dormitory. "Nervous, Potter?" Draco Malfoy called as Harry passed the Slytherin table. "Father says the final task is designed to break champions mentally as well as physically." Harry paused, studying Malfoy with new perspective. The fragment's knowledge allowed him to see past the sneering facade to the insecurity beneath, and to recognize the subtle magical constraints that shaped Draco's behavior, similar to those Dumbledore had placed on Harry's friends. "Actually, Malfoy, I'm looking forward to it," Harry replied calmly. Some challenges have a way of revealing who people really are beneath all their external influences. Draco's brow furrowed slightly, confused by the response and the significant look Harry gave him. For a brief moment, something like uncertainty flickered in his gray eyes before the practiced sneer returned. As Harry walked away, he wondered if someday, after Voldemort was dealt with, he might find a way to help even Draco break free from the magical and social constraints that narrowed his potential. The thought would have been laughable months ago, but Harry's perspective had expanded along with his abilities. The hours before the task passed in a carefully orchestrated routine. Harry attended his morning classes, reviewed task strategies with Hermione and Ron during lunch, and spent an hour in apparent meditation by the lake, actually conducting final mental preparations for the blood ritual modification. By late afternoon, anticipation had reached fever pitch. The stands surrounding the maze entrance were packed with spectators, magical amplification systems broadcasting commentary across the grounds. In the champion's tent, Professor McGonagall reviewed the rules one final time. Your objective is to reach the Triwizard Cup at the center of the maze. The first to touch it will be declared winner. Be warned that the maze contains magical obstacles and creatures beyond standard curriculum. If you find yourself in true danger, send up red sparks with your wand, and a staff member will extract you immediately. Harry noticed Crouch Jr., still disguised as Moody, watching him intently during this briefing. The impostor had been growing increasingly agitated as the task approached, his magical aura fluctuating with anticipation and anxiety. Harry deliberately avoided eye contact, not wanting to reveal any awareness of the deception. As the champions prepared to enter the maze according to their standing in the tournament, Dumbledore approached Harry under the pretense of offering encouragement. "Everything is in place," he murmured. "The tracking charm has been applied to the cup. Sirius and the others are in position. When you reach the cup, we will be only moments behind you." Harry nodded. "And Crouch?" "Will be apprehended the moment the portkey activates," Dumbledore confirmed. "We cannot risk him interfering or warning his master." The cannon sounded, signaling the start of the task. Harry and Cedric, tied for first place, entered the maze simultaneously from different entrances. The tall hedges closed behind them, instantly muffling the sounds of the crowd. "Good luck," Cedric called before taking the first left turn. Harry proceeded with calculated efficiency. Unlike the previous tasks, where he had genuinely competed to win, today his goal was simply to reach the cup as quickly as possible. The sooner he triggered Voldemort's trap, the less time the Dark Lord would have to sense that something was wrong. Drawing on the fragment's knowledge of magical navigation, Harry moved through the maze with unerring precision. Where other champions might wander or backtrack, he proceeded almost directly toward the center, his enhanced magical perception allowing him to sense the cup's location through the hedges. This didn't mean the path was easy. The maze contained formidable challenges, a boggart that transformed into a dementor, a sphinx with particularly cryptic riddles, areas of inverted gravity, and patches of magical mist that distorted perception. Harry dispatched each obstacle efficiently, using just enough power to proceed without revealing the full extent of his abilities. If Crouch Jr. was monitoring his progress somehow, Harry wanted to appear capable but not suspiciously so. About 20 minutes into the task, Harry heard a scream from somewhere to his left, Fleur's voice, raised in alarm or pain. For a moment, his heart clenched with genuine concern before he reminded himself that this was part of their plan. Fleur had intentionally arranged to be eliminated from the task early, allowing her to join the backup team without raising suspicion. Soon after, red sparks rose from that direction, confirming her rescue. 1 champion down, 2 to go. Harry continued forward, encountering Cedric at a crossroads about 10 minutes later. The Hufflepuff looked disheveled, his robe singed and a cut bleeding on his forehead. Blast-ended Scrut, he explained grimly. Nearly got roasted. You. Sphinx, Harry replied. That way leads to a dead end, he added, pointing to the left path. I can sense the cup's magic, it's straight ahead, maybe 200 meters. Cedric nodded gratefully. Thanks, Harry. Good luck. They parted again, Cedric taking the right fork while Harry continued straight. Harry felt a twinge of guilt for misdirecting his fellow champion. The cup was actually down the left path, but he needed to reach it first, and he couldn't risk explaining the real situation to Cedric. 5 minutes later, Harry rounded a corner and saw it, the Triwizard Cup, gleaming on a plinth in a small clearing at the center of the maze. Its blue-white light pulsed invitingly, and Harry could detect the portkey enchantment layered within its magical signature. He paused, sending a mental signal through the blood bond to Sirius, in position. Ready to proceed. The answering pulse confirmed receipt, strike team ready. Proceed when ready. Harry drew a slow breath, mentally reviewing each step of his plan. Then, with deliberate purpose, he strode forward and grasped the cup's handle. The world dissolved into a whirling vortex of color and sound. The portkey yanked him across space, his body compressed and stretched simultaneously in the familiar but uncomfortable sensation of magical transportation. When his feet slammed back to earth, Harry was prepared. He rolled with the momentum, coming up in a defensive crouch, wand ready. He had arrived in exactly the location they had anticipated, the graveyard of Little Hangleton. Ancient tombstones rose around him, shadows lengthening in the evening light. At the center stood a large cauldron, already bubbling with some dark potion. Beside it waited a short, stooped figure holding a bundle of robes. Wormtail, Harry acknowledged coldly, rising to his feet. He made a show of looking around in confusion. What is this? Where am I? Peter Pettigrew's watery eyes widened with nervous anticipation. It worked, he muttered, seemingly to himself. The master will be pleased. From the bundle in Pettigrew's arms came a high, cold voice that made Harry's skin crawl despite his preparation. Do not stand there gawking, Wormtail. Secure the boy and proceed with the ritual. Now. Wormtail fumbled for his wand, casting a body-binding curse that Harry allowed to hit him. He fell rigidly to the ground, internally remaining calm as he was levitated to a large headstone, Tom Riddle Sr.'s grave, just as they had predicted. Magical ropes bound Harry to the stone as Pettigrew cancelled the body bind. The timing was critical now. Harry needed to appear resistant but ultimately helpless, all while preparing to implement his ritual modification. You won't get away with this, Harry said, injecting his voice with appropriate fear and defiance. People know where I am, they'll come looking. By the time anyone realizes you're missing, it will be too late, Wormtail replied, his voice gaining confidence as he began the ritual preparations. The ceremony proceeded exactly as Harry had anticipated from his research. Wormtail added the bone of Voldemort's father, extracted from the grave below Harry's feet. Next came Wormtail's own sacrifice, cutting off his hand with a scream of pain that echoed through the graveyard. Now came the crucial moment. Wormtail approached Harry with a silver dagger, his remaining hand shaking. "Blood of the enemy, forcibly taken, you will resurrect your foe," he intoned, pressing the blade against Harry's arm. As the knife cut into his flesh, Harry activated the ritual modification, silently focusing his magical intent through the flowing blood. "I give this blood freely under specific condition, that it creates between us a debt that cannot be repaid, a connection on my terms, not yours. Blood of Tom Marvolo Riddle's enemy, conditionally given, you will bind him to my mercy." The magic flared invisibly as Wormtail collected the blood, unaware of the powerful intent now infused within it. He returned to the cauldron, adding the final ingredient with trembling reverence. The liquid within turned a blinding white, emitting sparks that illuminated the entire graveyard. Then suddenly, the light extinguished. A surge of white steam billowed from the cauldron, obscuring everything in a thick, impenetrable fog. Through this mist, Harry sensed movement, the rising of a tall, skeletal figure from within the cauldron. The ritual had worked, at least in its primary purpose. Lord Voldemort had a body once more. "Robe me," came that cold, high voice from within the steam. Wormtail, still sobbing over his bleeding arm, fumbled to dress his master with one hand. As the mist began to clear, Lord Voldemort emerged into view. He was tall and skeletally thin, with gleaming red eyes and a face whiter than a skull, flattened nose with slits for nostrils, and long, spider-like fingers. He examined his new body with expressions of satisfaction and triumph, flexing his fingers and running hands over his hairless head. "My wand, Wormtail," he commanded. The sniveling servant presented a pale yew wand, which Voldemort took with reverent pleasure. He turned his scarlet gaze to Harry, still bound to the tombstone. "Harry Potter," he whispered. "The boy who lived. How fitting that you should witness my rebirth, before experiencing your death." Harry maintained his facade of fearful defiance, but internally he was monitoring the effects of his ritual modification. Something was happening, a subtle magical current flowing between himself and Voldemort, invisible to normal perception but clear to Harry's enhanced senses. Voldemort seemed to feel it too. A flicker of confusion crossed his serpentine features as he approached Harry. "Curious," he murmured. "I feel your blood within me, Potter. Your mother's protection flows in my veins now too. I can touch you." He pressed a long white finger to Harry's cheek, demonstrating the truth of his statement. Unlike in Harry's first year, there was no burning reaction. But something else was occurring, a magical resonance that made Voldemort withdraw his hand with a slight frown. "No matter," the Dark Lord continued, dismissing whatever sensation had troubled him. "We have more important business to attend to." He turned to Wormtail. "Your arm, Wormtail." The servant extended his bleeding stump with a whimper of gratitude, but Voldemort laughed coldly. "The other arm, fool." With obvious reluctance, Wormtail presented his left forearm, bearing the dark mark. Voldemort pressed his finger to it, causing Pettigrew to howl in pain as the mark turned jet black. "Now we shall see," Voldemort whispered, "who remains faithful, and who will pay the price of disloyalty." The air filled with the sounds of apparition as dark-robed figures materialized throughout the graveyard, Death Eaters answering their master's call. They approached cautiously, forming a circle around Voldemort and the bound Harry. "Welcome, my friends," Voldemort greeted them silkily. 13 years it has been, and yet here you stand before me as though it were yesterday. I confess myself, disappointed." What followed was precisely what Harry had expected, Voldemort berating his followers for failing to search for him, punctuated by liberal use of the Cruciatus curse on those who offered inadequate explanations. Some groveled successfully, others writhed under torture. Harry used this time to continue monitoring the effects of his ritual modification. The magical current between himself and Voldemort was strengthening, creating what felt like a tether, not the parasitic connection of the Horcrux, but something more balanced, almost contractual in its magical structure. It was working. The conditional intent in his blood was establishing itself within the magic of Voldemort's new body. Voldemort eventually turned his attention back to Harry. "You stand, Harry Potter, upon the remains of my late father," he said softly, red eyes gleaming. "A muggle and a fool. Very like your dear mother. But they both had their uses, did they not? Your mother died to defend you as a child, and I killed my father, and see how useful he has proved himself, in death." The Dark Lord paced before Harry, clearly enjoying his captive audience. "You know, of course, that they have called this boy my downfall. You all know that on the night I lost my powers and my body, I tried to kill him. His mother died in the attempt to save him, and unwittingly provided him with a protection I admit I had not foreseen. I could not touch the boy." He raised a long white finger. "But now, that protection is gone. I can touch him now." To demonstrate, Voldemort pressed his finger against Harry's forehead, right where the lightning scar had been. Instead of the searing pain Harry had experienced in the past, there was only a strange resonance, like plucking a taut string between them. Voldemort noticed it too, his eyes narrowing slightly before he continued his monologue for his Death Eaters. "I miscalculated, my friends, I admit it. My curse was deflected by the woman's foolish sacrifice, and it rebounded upon me. But no matter. I can touch him now." Harry sensed the time had come to spring the second phase of his plan. He needed to provoke Voldemort into a direct magical confrontation, one that would fully activate the binding properties of the ritual modification. "Brave words from someone who hid as a wraith for 13 years, Harry called out, his voice steady. "Tell me, does it bother you that a baby defeated the great Lord Voldemort? Or should I call you Tom Riddle, since that's your real name?" The effect was instantaneous. Voldemort's red eyes blazed with fury. "You dare, I dare a lot of things," Harry interrupted. "Like pointing out that you're standing here giving speeches instead of actually proving you can defeat me. Afraid I might embarrass you in front of your servants again?" Whispers rippled through the circle of Death Eaters. Voldemort's lipless mouth twisted in rage. "You think you can provoke me into rash action, Potter? I am not so easily manipulated. You will die tonight, but first, you will suffer." He turned to his followers. "Untie him, Wormtail, and give him back his wand. I will show you all how easily the great Harry Potter falls when Lord Voldemort is restored to full power." This was exactly what Harry had hoped for, a formal duel that would establish direct magical contact between them, allowing his ritual modification to fully activate. As Wormtail nervously removed the ropes, Harry sensed a disturbance at the edge of his perception, the blood bond with Sirius activating. The strike team had arrived and was positioning themselves around the graveyard perimeter, still concealed. Harry accepted his wand from Wormtail, feeling its familiar warmth in his palm. He stood straight, facing Voldemort across the small clearing among the graves. "You have been taught how to duel, Harry Potter?" Voldemort asked softly, his red eyes gleaming. "I've picked up a few things," Harry replied with deliberate understatement. Voldemort's lipless mouth curled into a smile. "We bow to each other, Harry. Come, the niceties must be observed. Dumbledore would like you to show good manners before I kill you. Bow to death, Harry." Harry maintained eye contact but did not bow. "You're not death. You're just a man who's afraid of dying." Fury flashed across Voldemort's face. "I said, bow." He raised his wand, and Harry felt invisible pressure forcing his spine to bend. He allowed it to happen, keeping his magical defenses focused on what would come next. "Very good," Voldemort whispered, lifting the pressure. "And now, you face me, like a man, straight-backed and proud, the way your father died." He raised his wand. Crucio. Harry was ready. As the curse streaked toward him, he activated the full magical intent embedded in his blood now flowing through Voldemort's veins. Instead of dodging or shielding, he stood firm and spoke a single word in a language older than Latin, the activation phrase for the blood bond's conditional magic. Vinctum. The Cruciatus struck him, but instead of causing pain, it created a visible golden thread of magic between their wands. More importantly, the ritual modification fully activated. Harry felt the magical contract assert itself, the conditional intent in his blood establishing dominance within the connection. Voldemort's eyes widened in shock as he felt it too, the sudden reversal of magical control, his own spell feeding back into the connection between them. "What is this?" he hissed, trying to break the connection. "What have you done?" Harry held firm, keeping the golden thread intact. "Blood of the enemy, Tom. But not forcibly taken, conditionally given. You used my blood for your resurrection, but you didn't understand what you were taking." Around them, the Death Eaters shifted uneasily, sensing something had gone terribly wrong with their master's triumphant return. The golden thread between their wands began to splinter, shooting off branches that formed a golden cage around them. This was not priori incantatum as Harry had once expected, the brother wand effect, but something new, created by the interaction between the ritual modification and their direct magical contact. "This is impossible," Voldemort snarled, still struggling to break free. "No mere boy could interfere with magic this ancient." "I'm not just any boy," Harry replied calmly. "And I had excellent teachers." The golden cage stabilized, humming with power. Within its boundaries, Harry could feel the magical balance shifting further, Voldemort's resurrection magic reconfiguring itself according to the conditions Harry had embedded in his blood. It was time for the final phase. Harry raised his voice, not just for Voldemort to hear but for all the Death Eaters surrounding them. "Tom Marvolo Riddle, by the power of freely given blood and binding intent, I claim the debt your resurrection has created. Your life restored through my sacrifice places you under obligation that cannot be denied by magic itself." The words were formal, activating ancient principles of magical debt that even Voldemort could not easily dismiss. The golden cage pulsed brighter with each word, the magic recognizing and enforcing the truth of Harry's claim. Voldemort's face contorted with rage and disbelief. "You think ancient words and clever tricks can bind Lord Voldemort? I, who have gone further than any wizard in conquering death. That's exactly what makes this binding possible," Harry countered. "You chose to use my blood specifically because it carried my mother's protection. You wanted that power for yourself. But in taking it willingly into your new body, you created a magical channel between us, one that works both ways." Understanding and horror dawned in those red eyes. "The ritual has bound you to terms you never considered," Harry confirmed. "My blood carries my intent, Tom. And that intent now shapes the very magic that sustains your new form." Around them, chaos erupted as Harry's strike team finally revealed themselves. Sirius, Fleur, Flitwick, Bill Weasley, and Dumbledore appeared at strategic positions around the cemetery, engaging the surprised Death Eaters with coordinated precision. But within the golden cage, Harry and Voldemort remained isolated, locked in their magical confrontation while battle raged around them. "Even if what you say is true," Voldemort hissed, still struggling against the binding, "you cannot hold this connection forever. When it breaks, I will destroy you and everyone you've brought to this foolish ambush." "You misunderstand," Harry replied calmly. "I don't need to maintain this indefinitely. The binding is already complete. Your new body exists on my terms now, whether you acknowledge it or not." To demonstrate, Harry adjusted his magical intent, sending a pulse of specific command through the connection: "You cannot harm me directly." Voldemort, sensing the change, immediately raised his wand. Avada Kedavra. The killing curse left his wand but dissolved into harmless green sparks halfway to Harry, the binding magic preventing the direct attack. Voldemort stared in genuine shock, perhaps the first time in decades he had experienced true surprise. "What have you done?" he whispered. "Created balance," Harry answered. "You used my blood to restore your body, but that body now operates under constraints you never anticipated. You cannot directly harm me, nor can I directly harm you. We are bound by mutual limitation." "Then we are at stalemate," Voldemort snarled. "Not quite," Harry corrected. "While I cannot harm you directly, I've made no such limitation on indirect methods. He glanced meaningfully at the battle raging around them, where Dumbledore was systematically disabling Death Eaters while Sirius and the others created a perimeter of containment. Voldemort assessed the situation with the rapid calculation of a skilled strategist. His followers were being overwhelmed, the ambush turned against them. Worse, his own magic was compromised in ways he was only beginning to understand. "This is not over, Potter," he hissed. "Blood bindings can be broken. Magical debts can be repaid. I will find a way to undo what you've done." "You're welcome to try," Harry replied evenly. "But understand this, the binding works both ways. Any attempt to circumvent it will have consequences. Your new body exists because of my blood. Remember that before you attempt to corrupt the magic sustaining it." With a final look of venomous hatred, Voldemort made his decision. He gathered his magic inward, collapsing the golden cage through sheer force of will, and disapparated with a crack that sounded like breaking glass. The remaining Death Eaters, seeing their master flee, attempted to follow suit. Some succeeded, but many found themselves caught in anti-disapparition wards hastily erected by Flitwick and Bill. As the dust settled, Sirius rushed to Harry's side. "Are you all right? Did it work?" Harry nodded, feeling simultaneously exhausted and exhilarated. "It worked. Not perfectly, he's still free and dangerous, but the binding took hold. He can't harm me directly, and more importantly, his new body is fundamentally tied to the conditions I set in the blood ritual." Dumbledore approached more slowly, his expression a complex mixture of amazement, approval, and concern. "Harry, what you've accomplished here, it's unprecedented. Blood ritual modification of this sophistication would have been impossible without the fragment's knowledge," Harry finished for him. "Ironic, isn't it? The very tool you created to shape me into a weapon against Voldemort is what allowed me to find a different solution, one that doesn't require my death." Dumbledore had the grace to look chagrined. "I never wanted, perhaps not consciously," Harry interrupted. "But the path you were setting led there nonetheless." He softened his tone slightly. "I understand your intentions were noble, Professor. But intentions aren't enough when you're making decisions that affect others' lives so fundamentally." Around them, Fleur, Bill, and Flitwick were securing captured Death Eaters, Lucius Malfoy, Crabbe, Goyle, and several others. The silver masks had been removed, their identities now exposed for all to witness. Sirius gave a low whistle. "This is going to cause an uproar at the Ministry. Half these people are major donors to Fudge's campaigns. Which is precisely why we need to control how this information reaches the public," Dumbledore cautioned. "If handled poorly, it could lead to denials and cover-ups rather than preparation for Voldemort's return." "I've already taken care of that," Harry replied. Hermione released Rita Skeeter just before the task began, with very specific information and a rather compelling exclusive story opportunity. "By tomorrow morning, the entire wizarding world will know that Voldemort has returned and exactly which Death Eaters were present for his resurrection." Dumbledore looked momentarily taken aback by Harry's foresight, then nodded slowly. "A bold approach. Cornelius will be furious." "Let him be," Sirius said dismissively. "With public exposure this complete, he'll have no choice but to acknowledge the truth or resign in disgrace." As they organized the transport of prisoners and prepared to return to Hogwarts, Fleur approached Harry, her expression concerned. "You're bleeding," she noted, gesturing to his arm where Wormtail had cut him. "It's nothing serious," Harry assured her, though he allowed her to heal the wound with a gentle charm. "The ritual modification," she said quietly. "It worked as designed." "Better than expected," Harry confirmed. "The conditional binding is stable and comprehensive. Voldemort literally cannot harm me directly, and more importantly, his continued existence now operates under magical constraints he doesn't fully understand yet." Fleur studied him with knowing eyes. "You didn't tell them everything, did you? About what the binding actually does?" Harry glanced toward Dumbledore, who was occupied with securing the prisoners. No, he admitted softly. Some aspects of the binding are, better kept between us for now. The full truth was more complex than Harry had revealed to anyone except Fleur. The blood binding didn't just prevent Voldemort from harming Harry directly, it created a fundamental magical dependency. Voldemort's new body wasn't just created using Harry's blood, it was sustained by the ongoing magical connection between them. This gave Harry leverage he wasn't ready to disclose publicly, the ability to potentially unmake what the resurrection ritual had created, should it become necessary. Not by killing Voldemort directly, but by severing the magical connection that maintained his physical form. "You've created something unprecedented," Fleur observed. "A magical leash that even the Dark Lord cannot easily break." "A last resort," Harry clarified. "One I hope never to use. But after everything he's done, everything he would still do given the chance." "You needed insurance," Fleur finished for him. "I understand. And I will keep your confidence." Their return to Hogwarts created a sensation unlike anything in recent memory. The disappearance of the Triwizard Cup and Harry Potter had already caused confusion and concern. Their reappearance with captured Death Eaters, tales of Voldemort's resurrection, and evidence of a thwarted attack transformed confusion into controlled chaos. Crouch Jr. had been captured as planned the moment the portkey activated, revealing his true identity when the Polyjuice potion wore off during interrogation. The real Moody, though still recovering, provided damning testimony about his imprisonment and impersonation. Between the captured Death Eaters, Crouch's confession under Veritaserum, and Rita Skeeter's explosive front-page exposé the following morning, the wizarding world was forced to confront the truth: Lord Voldemort had returned. Minister Fudge initially attempted to downplay or deny these revelations but found himself politically isolated when faced with overwhelming evidence and public demand for action. Within a week, he had resigned, replaced by Amelia Bones as interim minister, a development Harry and his allies had quietly encouraged through strategic information sharing. The aftermath of the third task also brought significant changes at Hogwarts. The constraints Dumbledore had placed on students began to dissolve more rapidly as Harry's freed magic continued to influence those around him. Like a catalyst accelerating a chemical reaction, his presence triggered a cascade of awakenings as students and staff found themselves thinking more clearly, questioning more effectively, and accessing magical abilities previously suppressed. 3 weeks after the graveyard confrontation, Harry sat with his core allies in the Room of Requirement, assessing their progress and planning next steps. "The Emancipation Papers have been approved," Sirius reported with satisfaction. "As of yesterday, you're legally recognized as an adult in the wizarding world, Harry. No more Dursleys, no more ministry restrictions on underage magic, and most importantly, no more magical guardianship by Dumbledore." "And the financial audit?" Hermione asked. "Ongoing," Bill Weasley replied. "The goblins are being thorough. Several unauthorized withdrawals from the Potter vaults have already been identified and reversed. Dumbledore has agreed to make full restitution, plus interest." Harry nodded, unsurprised. The headmaster had been remarkably cooperative since the graveyard incident, perhaps recognizing that resistance would only damage his position further. "What about the Horcruxes?" Neville asked. The once shy boy had blossomed into a confident young man over the past months, his formerly suppressed magical abilities now flourishing. "We've located 4 of the 6 we believe exist," Harry explained. "The diary was destroyed in my second year. The ring is hidden at the Gaunt Shack. Dumbledore and I will retrieve it next week with proper precautions. The locket is at Grimmauld Place. Sirius's brother apparently stole it from its hiding place years ago. And Hufflepuff's cup is in the Lestrange vault at Gringotts, which we can access now that Bellatrix has been officially charged with Death Eater activities. That leaves 2 unaccounted for," Fleur noted. "Something of Ravenclaw's, most likely," Hermione suggested. "And perhaps another Founder's item." "We'll find them," Harry said with quiet confidence. "With Voldemort constrained by the blood binding, we have time to be thorough." The conversation shifted to their immediate summer plans. With Voldemort's return now publicly acknowledged, the wizarding world was mobilizing, though not without resistance from those who preferred denial or had ties to Death Eater families. The Order of the Phoenix has been reactivated, Sirius reported, referring to Dumbledore's secret resistance organization from the First War. Though with some significant changes to its structure and transparency. And our own group? Luna asked dreamily. Does it have a name yet? They had been informally referring to their core team as the DA, but Luna's question highlighted the reality that they had evolved into something more significant than a study group, a genuine alternative to both the Ministry's bumbling response and Dumbledore's sometimes overly secretive approach. Phoenix Rising, Harry suggested after a moment's consideration. It acknowledges our connection to Dumbledore's order while establishing our independent identity. The name was met with nods of approval around the circle. Speaking of independence, Fleur said, I have news. I've been offered a position with Gringotts as expected, but with an interesting modification. The Paris branch has requested I serve as liaison between the British and French magical banking systems, specifically focusing on collaborative security against dark magic. This would allow me to continue working with you all while building international support. Harry felt a surge of pleasure at this news. The prospect of Fleur remaining nearby rather than returning permanently to France was more welcome than he'd anticipated. As their meeting concluded, the others departed to handle various responsibilities, leaving Harry and Fleur alone in the room. You never told me what you decided about your own plans, Fleur said, settling beside him on one of the comfortable sofas the room had provided. Now that you're legally emancipated, will you return to Hogwarts in the fall? Yes, Harry replied after a moment's consideration. Despite everything, it's still my home. And there's still work to be done here, students to help free from lingering constraints, preparations to make for whatever Voldemort attempts next. He will find a way to challenge the blood binding eventually, Fleur cautioned. Such magic, while powerful, is not permanent. Especially against a wizard of his knowledge and determination. I know, Harry acknowledged. That's why we need to locate and destroy the remaining Horcruxes before he discovers a countermeasure. Without his immortality failsafes, he becomes much more vulnerable. They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, each lost in their own thoughts. What about us? Fleur finally asked, her voice softer than usual. Where do we stand, Harry Potter? The question caught him slightly off guard, though perhaps it shouldn't have. Their relationship had evolved significantly since that first accidental touch of Veela fire, from cautious allies to trusted partners to something deeper that neither had explicitly named. I don't know exactly, Harry admitted honestly. I know that I trust you completely. That I value your perspective and presence more than almost anyone's. That the thought of you returning to France permanently was difficult to contemplate. A small smile curved Fleur's lips. For someone with access to the knowledge of 29 powerful witches and wizards, you can be remarkably inarticulate about personal matters. Harry laughed softly. The fragments offer excellent advice on defeating dark wizards and breaking magical bindings. They're less helpful with this. This? Fleur echoed, her blue eyes holding his. Whatever is happening between us, Harry clarified. Something that started with Veela fire but has become much more than a magical accident. Fleur's expression softened. The fire only revealed what was possible, Harry. Everything since has been our own choice. She reached out, her fingers brushing his cheek in a gesture reminiscent of how they had started this journey, with unexpected touch and transformative magic. But this time, there was no accidental flare of Veela fire, no shattering of bindings. Just the simple human connection between two people who had faced extraordinary circumstances together and emerged changed but stronger. Harry caught her hand gently. I choose this, then. Whatever comes next, Voldemort, Horcruxes, rebuilding the wizarding world, I want you beside me. Not because of magical bindings or shared trauma or convenient alliances, but because I care for you, Fleur Delacour. Her smile was like sunrise after the longest night. Then we are in agreement, Harry Potter. A partnership of choice, not circumstance. As their lips met in a first tentative kiss, Harry felt a different kind of magic than any the fragments had taught him, not the power of ancient spells or complex rituals, but the simple, profound magic of human connection freely given and gratefully received. The journey ahead would not be easy. Voldemort, though constrained, remained dangerous. The wizarding world, though awakening, still clung to many of its dysfunctional patterns. Dumbledore, though chastened, remained a complex figure whose full agenda was not entirely transparent. But for perhaps the first time since that fateful Halloween night when Voldemort had first marked him, Harry Potter faced the future on his own terms, not as a prophesied savior or manipulated weapon, but as himself, a young wizard of exceptional ability surrounded by loyal friends, armed with extraordinary knowledge, and finally, truly free. The fragments that Dumbledore had planted as tools of control had instead become instruments of liberation. The fire that Fleur had accidentally unleashed had burned away constraints rather than causing harm. And the scar that had marked him as Voldemort's equal now served as a reminder of his triumph over both the Dark Lord's malice and Dumbledore's manipulations. Phoenix rising indeed, not just for the wizarding world, but for Harry himself. From the ashes of others' plans and expectations, he had emerged transformed, empowered, and ready to forge his own destiny. "What are you thinking?" Fleur asked softly, noticing his contemplative expression. Harry smiled, feeling a profound sense of peace despite the challenges that still lay ahead. That sometimes, the things meant to control us become the very tools of our freedom. Dumbledore never imagined his soul fragments would help me break free from his influence. Voldemort never dreamed his resurrection ritual would bind him to my terms. And I never expected my Veela fire to transform a tournament competitor into. She gestured between them with a smile. Into whatever we're becoming, Harry completed, returning her smile. I guess the lesson is that magic, like life, rarely follows anyone's careful plans. Not Dumbledore's. Not Voldemort's. And not even ours, Fleur agreed. But perhaps that's for the best. The most beautiful magic often comes from unexpected combinations, from patterns no single mind could have designed. As they left the room of requirement hand in hand, Harry felt the fragments within him settling into a harmonious whole, no longer foreign pieces awkwardly assembled, but integral aspects of his expanded self. Similarly, the various allies and friends who had joined his cause were coalescing into something greater than their individual contributions, a true community united not by fear or manipulation, but by shared purpose and authentic choice. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them together. Not as pawns in someone else's game, but as architects of their own destiny. Phoenix rising, indeed. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.